What's up guys, welcome back. This is anime fiction. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was Reborn as the Emperor of Viltrumites Part 12. Now, let's begin. I distinctly recall the day I first encountered them. It was not due to any extraordinary circumstances, merely an ordinary rainy Tuesday in the warehouse district, but it marked the day my life transformed irrevocably. At that time, I held no significant status. Takeo Fujimoto, aged 32, possesses a wind quirk that is notably underwhelming in its effectiveness. It may be possible to use it to organize documents or to cool down your coffee if it is excessively hot. A characteristic that may have led to ridicule in middle school and resulted in being overlooked for job opportunities subsequently. On that day, I was assigned to provide security for Viper. May he rest in peace. It became evident that they were indeed literal pieces. I was stationed outside his office when they entered with an air of entitlement. The woman in black, her face obscured by a mask that appeared to absorb the light. The individual clad in immaculate white, tall and commanding, his presence permeating the room prior to his complete entrance. Conflict and Heisenberg. I was not familiar with those names at that time. It was unexpected to realize that within a matter of hours, they would possess everything that Viper had established. Unaware that the wet sounds and screams emanating from within would mark Viper's final contribution to this world. Little did I know that 2 months later, I would find myself in a penthouse overlooking Tokyo Bay, savoring 30-year-old whiskey, and managing a sum of money surpassing my parents' lifetime earnings, all while awaiting the conclusion of a meeting that had the potential to transform Japan's underworld permanently. However, that may be premature. Fujimoto, please come in. Heisenberg's voice resonates through the penthouse intercom system. I placed my glass down and adjusted my tie. Even after 2 months, his voice continues to evoke a profound reaction within me. The penthouse functions as their main meeting venue, a neutral space, held through numerous shell companies to the extent that even I am unaware of the official deed holder. The expansive floor-to-ceiling windows provide a sweeping vista of Tokyo Bay, with the city lights shimmering on the water's surface akin to scattered stars. I enter the conference room to find Heisenberg positioned by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. War occupies the position of authority at the table, her black mask consistently in place. Neither of them acknowledges my entrance right away. The shipment to Hosu has arrived safely, I report, maintaining a poised stance. Previous practices from my short experience in the military. Distribution has commenced via the new network. Profits are anticipated to exceed last quarter by 30%. Heisenberg remains at the window. What about our team? Compensation will be adjusted in accordance with the new scale. The healthcare program for their families has also been implemented. He now turns, directing a penetrating gaze towards me. Indeed. Commitment necessitates dedication. It is a phrase he frequently reiterates. Initially, I perceived it merely as a business philosophy. I now recognize that it is a more profound principle that guides their actions. War inclines her head slightly. As she speaks, her voice is transmitted through the mosque's modulator, producing an unsettling, mechanical tone that occasionally lingers in my thoughts. The representatives from Shi Hasaikai were once again monitoring our distribution points. Although it is not a question, I will provide a response regardless. Affirmative. 3 locations were utilized. Protocol was upheld, no confrontation and no acknowledgement. They appear to be becoming increasingly desperate, Heisenberg notes. Our product has rendered theirs outdated. This statement does not fully capture the reality. The quirk enhancement drug they developed, known as Elevation, has transformed the market. In contrast to Trigger or the Hasaikai's product, Elevation does not lead to mental deterioration or physical side effects. The improvement is precise, regulated, and in certain instances, lasting. Similar to mine. I flex my fingers, sensing the strength that now courses through them. 2 weeks ago, Heisenberg approached me with a small case containing a single vial. Your loyalty has been acknowledged, he stated, introducing the next evolution of Elevation. A lasting improvement. You deserve it. That evening, I found myself on an unoccupied beach where I successfully generated my first tornado, a modest yet authentic phenomenon. I, Takeo Fujimoto, possess a quirk that prevents me from extinguishing birthday candles, yet I can summon the wind as if I were an ancient deity. I expressed my emotions through tears. I am open to acknowledging it. Fujimoto. War's voice brings me back to the present moment. It appears that you are not fully focused. I apologize, I respond promptly. I have been considering the Hasaikai. An untruth, yet a secure one. It is not advisable to disclose that you were daydreaming during a briefing regarding military operations. That is not advisable if you wish to maintain the current arrangement of all your molecules. The Hasaikai represent a manifestation rather than the underlying condition, Heisenberg states. Their obsolescence was unavoidable. War rises from her chair with an unsettling elegance, as if the laws of gravity operate differently for her than for the rest of us. Is everything in place for tonight's meeting? I confirm that it is complete. The room is secure. Electronic surveillance is not feasible. Physical security measures are implemented with our most qualified personnel, all enhanced. The guest will access the premises via the private elevator. Satisfactory. Heisenberg redirects his attention to the window. This meeting has been anticipated for quite some time. It is imperative that we avoid any errors. I understand it is prudent not to inquire about the identity of this enigmatic guest. During my tenure with them, I have gained an understanding of the boundaries. I am fully aware of the boundaries of curiosity before it crosses into perilous territory. I recognize that being entrusted with significant responsibilities is a privilege that not many in our organization experience. Conflict draws near, and I resist the instinct to retreat. Her presence exerts a powerful influence, akin to being in proximity to a high-voltage line. You have performed admirably, Fujimoto, she states, her modulated voice exhibiting an unusual softness. Is your family satisfied with the arrangements? This is yet another aspect that required some adjustment. Their engagement with our families. Not as leverage. They have never threatened a loved one since the first day they achieved dominance, but as extensions of ourselves. The medical bills for my mother have been settled in full. My sister's children attend private schools. All matters are managed with utmost discretion and legality, utilizing channels that ensure complete confidentiality. They have all the necessary provisions, I respond. My mother requested that I express her gratitude once more for the specialists. War acknowledges with a single nod. Family is important, she states plainly. This is a fundamental principle for them. Family is important. Commitment necessitates dedication. Power requires precision. The repetition of these phrases serves as the cornerstone of their operations. You may proceed, Heisenberg states. Please return at 8. Ensure that Tanaka and Yoshida are included as additional security personnel. No other individuals are to be involved. I offer a slight bow, a habit I have cultivated in their presence, before exiting the conference room. The penthouse lobby exudes an air of refined elegance. Nothing extravagant, nothing that suggests criminal activity. Just subtle sophistication that conveys established wealth. Tanaka and Yoshida are already present, both attired in immaculate suits. Similar to my experience, they have advanced through the ranks swiftly. Similar to myself, they have undergone enhancements. Tanaka is now capable of producing heat with sufficient intensity to melt steel. Yoshida possesses remarkably swift reflexes, enabling him to evade bullets, as demonstrated during a territorial dispute with the remnants of Viper's former allies. Do you have any information on who will be attending? Tanaka inquires softly. I disapprove with a shake of my head. Beyond our level of responsibility. It appears to be an individual of significance, Yoshida notes. I have not observed the leadership exhibiting this level of focus before. Concentrated is a more refined expression. In the days preceding this meeting, War has exhibited a more reserved demeanor than typical, dedicating hours to silent contemplation. Heisenberg has been meticulously reviewing contingency plans with a level of intensity that approaches obsession. Whatever is occurring tonight, it is significant. The private elevator emits a gentle chime, prompting us to take our positions without delay. I lead the way, with Tanaka and Yoshida positioned at the doors on either side. Protocol established for esteemed visitors. The doors open smoothly and quietly. The individual who emerges may not appear remarkable at first sight. Of average height, appropriately attired without being overly distinguished. Impressive, with the demeanor of an individual familiar with leadership. However, I sense it, a pressure in the air, as if the atmosphere has become denser. My heightened awareness perceives an anomaly in his demeanor, suggesting that he is not entirely finished. It seems as though certain aspects of him have been substituted with alternative elements. His smile is agreeable, yet it fails to convey genuine warmth in his eyes. Good evening. I understand that my presence has been anticipated. I acknowledge, resisting the urge to retreat. This direction, sir. As I guide him to the conference room, I observe something unusual. Tanaka and Yoshida, Both seasoned individuals with extensive experience in the darker aspects of urban life exhibit a pallid complexion. Yoshida's hands exhibit a slight tremor. They experience it as well. This person poses a danger that extends beyond mere physical threats. His face stands out the most. It appears disengaged. It appears that upon closer examination, it is not present for some reason. I tap lightly on the conference room door and proceed to open it, not pausing for a reply. The guest has arrived, I state, stepping aside to allow entry. The gentleman strides by, and for a fleeting instant, our gazes connect. There is an element of antiquity in that gaze, reminiscent of predators featured in long-forgotten documentaries. I appreciate your assistance, Fujimoto, Heisenberg states. Please wait outside. I close the door, but not before I catch the visitor's initial remarks. War and Heisenberg. Your esteemed reputation is well known. I am all for one. My blood feels chilled. Every individual involved in criminal activities in Japan is aware of that name, the enigmatic figure of the underworld, the force behind numerous criminal enterprises. A figure of such strength and mystery that many consider him to be a mere legend. It seems that is not the case. Time elapses. Tanaka, Yoshida, and I stand in silence outside the conference room. The significance of the events occurring behind that door is far too substantial for informal dialogue. At last, as the clock approaches midnight, the door swings open. All for One appears first, his demeanor reflecting satisfaction. Your employers are truly impressive, he remarks as he walks by. Japan's underworld has been in need of new talent for a considerable period. I anticipate a fruitful collaboration. Collaboration opportunity? In collaboration with All for One? After his departure, Heisenberg contacts us. He and War remain positioned at the conference table. A small metal case now occupies the space between them, an addition that was not present previously. The meeting was productive, Heisenberg remarks, his tone remaining neutral. We are poised to significantly expand our operations in the upcoming months. War's masked face turns toward me. Fujimoto, you will be responsible for overseeing the new distribution network in the northern prefectures. Choose your team with great care. This partnership demands our utmost excellence. I express my respect, feeling both honored and apprehensive simultaneously. I acknowledge your point. All for One is impressed with our operation, Heisenberg states. Especially with elevation. He is of the opinion that it can be further refined for specific specialized applications. War indicates the metal case. This document includes samples of quirk-altering compounds from his personal collection. We will be incorporating them into our research. I strive to maintain a composed demeanor, yet internally, my thoughts are in turmoil. All for One is not only recognizing our operation but also actively collaborating with it. In a mere 2 months, we have progressed from managing a modest drug operation to partnering with the most infamous criminal in Japan's history. There will be resistance, Heisenberg cautions. The Shi Hasaikai is unlikely to relinquish their market share without resistance. Other competitors will arise, aiming to challenge our growth. The voice of War is unyielding and definitive. They are likely to encounter difficulties. The certainty conveyed in those 3 words evokes a profound sense of unease. I have observed the consequences faced by those who oppose War and Heisenberg. The fortunate ones pass away swiftly. Are there any questions? Heisenberg inquires, directing his gaze towards each of us sequentially. We express our disapproval. In this industry, inquiries can pose significant risks. It is advisable to exercise patience and monitor the situation closely. Thank you. Fujimoto, please stay. Tanaka, Yoshida, you are excused. Once we are alone, the atmosphere changes subtly, not warmer, precisely, but more relaxed. You have been with us since the inception, Heisenberg remarks, observing me with his intense gaze. Your commitment has been steadfast. I adjust my posture instinctively. You provided me with a sense of purpose, strength, and stability for my family. And in return, War inquires, her mechanical voice taking on a gentler tone. I am here to assist you with whatever you need, I respond promptly. I genuinely mean it. I would go to great lengths for these two. Not solely due to fear, although that is certainly present, but from a place of sincere gratitude and respect. In their presence, I felt insignificant. I now demand respect. My family is well provided for. My quirk, which was once a source of embarrassment, has now positioned me as one of the most formidable wind users in the nation. Heisenberg acknowledges with a sense of satisfaction. The northern expansion presents significant challenges. All for One's involvement in our operation introduces both opportunities and scrutiny. It is essential to remain vigilant. I acknowledge your point. War inclines her head slightly. You may question our commitment to sharing profits generously. You might ask why we support our employees' families. You could be curious about our investment in schools and clinics within the communities where we operate. I become immobilized. How did she manage to? Your thoughts are clear, she continues. You consider it to be inefficient and overly generous. I would never question. Heisenberg raises a hand, signaling for silence. It's a valid inquiry. The response is straightforward. Genuine power is not solely founded on fear. Fear fosters adversaries who anticipate vulnerability. However, when fear is paired with gratitude and a sincere commitment to enhancing individuals' lives, and you establish something unwavering, war concludes. The individuals we assist will remain loyal, not out of fear, although that exists, but because their lives are significantly improved through our support. Their explanations are highly logical. Not charity, not kindness strategy. Criminals often lack the foresight necessary for long-term planning. The collaboration with All for One expedites our schedule, Heisenberg states. He exerts significant influence over Japan's underworld. However, his approaches are somewhat antiquated. They depend heavily on intimidation and deceit. He perceives in us a more effective framework. War approaches the window. He perceives that he is leveraging our resources. This is tolerable for the time being. The implication is so bold that it almost takes my breath away. They are strategizing to ultimately surpass All for One himself. The antagonist who has endured through numerous generations of heroes attempting to defeat him? Your loyalty will be rewarded, Heisenberg states, seemingly pleased with the reaction he observes on my face. Please proceed with preparations for the northern expansion. Ensure that your team is selected by the end of the week. I respectfully acknowledge the situation and proceed to depart, my thoughts continuing to analyze all that has been conveyed. And Fujimoto? War calls after me. Her voice, even when modulated, possesses a sharpness that immobilizes me. It is important to acknowledge that while we appreciate loyalty and offer generous rewards for it, acts of betrayal are considered unacceptable. I would never, certainly not, she interjects, her tone becoming slightly more gentle. That is the reason you continue to thrive. Upon returning to my apartment, a humble space that reflects my discretion despite my financial status, I pour myself another whiskey and endeavor to soothe my tumultuous thoughts. All for One. The expansion to the north. The suggestion that my superiors may ultimately confront the most formidable antagonist in Japan's history. I proceed to the balcony, extending my hand. The wind reacts effortlessly, swirling around my fingers with a gentle familiarity. With a precise movement of my wrist, I generate a small tornado that elegantly swirls across my palm. The authority bestowed upon me by individuals who emerged unexpectedly and methodically assumed control of a comprehensive criminal network. Who are they, truly? What is their origin? What factors contributed to the development of elevation, considering that other established groups, despite their resources and history, were only able to produce a lesser product? Inquiries I will refrain from voicing publicly. Inquiries that may pose significant risks if I were to pursue them. This evening, with the whiskey enhancing my senses and the wind responding to my will, I permit myself to reflect. There are, naturally, some speculations, discussions among the senior members of our organization. There are opinions suggesting that War and Heisenberg may not be entirely human, but rather entities assuming human guise. Some assert that they are the outcome of a government super soldier program that has deviated from its intended purpose. My individual hypothesis. They are precisely what they seem. Top-tier predators that have identified a hunting ground that matches their exceptional skills. I generate a small tornado, observing its rotation as it moves across my balcony. 2 weeks ago, I was in no condition to extinguish a match. At this moment, I possess the capability to demolish this structure. The aspect of War and Heisenberg that genuinely unsettles me is quite profound. It is not their cruelty towards adversaries that concerns me, although I have witnessed the devastating effects of war, which can dismantle a person completely for acts of betrayal against us. Neither their enigmatic beginnings nor their evident bravery in confronting All for One himself. No, what concerns me is how they recognize potential in individuals that those individuals fail to recognize in themselves. They convert the vulnerable into the powerful, the trivial into the vital. This prompts me to consider the potential they perceive within Japan's criminal underworld. Within society itself? What will be the outcome of their transformation? The wind swirls around me, reflecting my unspoken restlessness. I pause to collect my thoughts, allowing the tension to subside. I am fully committed to their ultimate goal at this time. They have provided me with all I need: authority, direction, and stability for my family. In exchange, they can expect my unwavering loyalty, even if that loyalty ultimately positions me in opposition to All for One himself. I finish my whiskey and proceed indoors. Tomorrow is expected to be quite busy. A new empire is emerging, and remarkably, I am contributing to its development. My role was to stand guard outside a door when War and Heisenberg made their pivotal decision to alter the course of history. The afternoon sun created elongated shadows over UA's outdoor training field while Class 1A participated in their combat exercises. Todoroki positioned himself at the edge, his gaze intently focused on Marcus Grayson. Marcus had been a source of concern for him ever since the USJ incident. There was a distinct quality to his movements, characterized by the precision of his strikes and the deliberate restraint that appeared to guide each of his actions. It was unusual for a student whose quirk had reportedly emerged only recently. Marcus was engaged in a sparring session with Kirishima, with each strike meticulously aimed to assess his opponent's hardening capabilities while ensuring no real harm was inflicted. His movements were smooth and deliberate, reminiscent of a dancer fully aware of the space he was permitted to inhabit. "Please switch partners," Aizawa announced, his voice resonating across the field. Marcus acknowledged Kirishima with a nod before proceeding towards Ojiro for his upcoming match. As he took off his training jacket, Todoroki's gaze sharpened. Marcus displayed fading bruises along his arms and across his exposed back, yellowish-purple marks indicative of rigorous, recent training. Todoroki observed the new additions, noting their presence with a keen analytical eye. Impact bruises. Aligned with rigorous combat training standards. A chill settled in Todoroki's stomach. A familiar discomfort he recognized all too well. The bruises served as a reminder of his formative training sessions with Endeavor. Waking up sore and bruised, consistently pushed beyond reasonable limits in his father's relentless pursuit of crafting the ideal hero. Marcus adjusted his posture, appearing unaffected by the blemishes on his skin. He seemed to exhibit signs of frustration, as though the healing process of the bruises should have progressed more swiftly. Todoroki assessed the situation, concluding, his healing factor must be compromised from the USJ incident, as he observed Marcus commencing his match with Ojiro. However, who would be exerting enough effort in training him to leave marks like that, considering his strength? The response arrived promptly, accompanied by the recollection of a formidable presence occupying the entrance of the recovery room. Detective Naruto Grayson. Uncle of Marcus. Evelyn's father. A man whose mere presence could render even Bakugo speechless. Todoroki's jaw clenched as unwelcome memories emerged. His father was positioned above him. The unwavering commitment to training. The expectations that overshadowed all other considerations. Could it be? He mused, seeing Marcus execute a flawless takedown against Ojiro. Is history repeating itself? So, how long have you two been together anyway? Kaminari inquired during lunch break, using his chopsticks to point between Marcus and Evelyn. You seem like you've been a couple forever. Several pupils looked at the question with piqued interest. Despite their candor about being cousins in a relationship, the Graysons rarely talked about personal matters. Marcus looked at Evelyn, who gave him a modest nod. Since we were 16, he said. This was part of their cover tale, taking a piece from his supper. Though I suppose you could say it was arranged much earlier than that. Arranged? Uraraka replied, leaning forward with interest. Like, by your families? By my father, Evelyn explained with a faint smile. He believed we were ideally matched. Marcus nodded, continuing with the polished background they'd created. Uncle Naruto has always been focused on efficiency. He recognized our compatibility early on and suggested the match when our quirks finally manifested. Suggested? Kaminari smiled. That sounds pretty formal. He said we were genetically compatible and would most likely produce powerful offspring, Marcus said matter-of-factly, ignoring the way several pupils' looks went from curiosity to uneasiness. It made sense to us. We already understood each other well. Having been closest to each other because of us both not having quirks. Mark is so used to his uncle's ideas that he has forgotten they're uncomfortable for others. An uneasy quiet fell across the table. That's romantic? Ashido finally asked, her typical excitement significantly reduced. It was practical, Evelyn replied, her tone warm. but we did develop genuine feelings for each other. My father simply expedited the process. Todoroki, who had been listening silently, put down his chopsticks. The talk verified fears that had arisen after the USJ incident. Genetically compatible. Powerful offspring. The words, arranged pairing, lingered in his thoughts, reminding him of how Endeavor defined his own marriage with Todoroki's mother. Midoriya, he muttered quietly, as the talk around them shifted to other subjects. You've visited the Grayson home, haven't you? Midoriya looked up, astonished by the blunt question. Yes. A few times for study sessions. What's Detective Grayson like? At home, I mean. Midoriya studied the question carefully. Intimidating, he conceded. But he seems to care deeply for Evelyn. He's very formal. Everything in their house is precisely arranged. There are a lot of rules about behavior and expectations. I see, Todoroki answered, his demeanor blank. Why do you ask? Todoroki did not respond immediately, instead watching Marcus giggle at something Kirishima said. Just curious. I believe Marcus Grayson is being abused by his uncle. Iida and Yaoyorozu looked at Todoroki, evidently taken aback by his frank statement. They had convened in an empty classroom after Todoroki had asked for help with a urgent matter. That's a serious accusation, Yaoyorozu stated cautiously. What evidence do you have? I've been observing him since the USJ incident, Todoroki stated calmly, despite the gravity of his claim. He has bruising consistent with excessive combat training. His relationship with his cousin was arranged by his uncle for the purpose of producing powerful offspring. His behavior shows signs of someone conditioned to meet excessive expectations. Iida adjusted his glasses with a concerned expression. While troubling if true, these observations may have alternate reasons. The bruising could be due to real training. Their relationship, while strange by our standards, could be culturally normal for their family. I know what I'm seeing, Todoroki maintained, his voice becoming unusually intense. I recognize the signs because I've seen them on old friends, constantly lying. Yaoyorozu's expression changed when he realized what was happening. Todoroki-kun, are you certain you're not projecting your friend's experiences onto Marcus's situation? I am certain that something is wrong, he said. I'm asking for your help to observe and gather more information before taking action. Iida and Yaoyorozu exchanged anxious looks. Very well, Iida eventually agreed. We will observe, but discreetly and without jumping to conclusions. If there is a genuine concern for a classmate's welfare, it would be irresponsible to ignore it. Thank you, Todoroki replied, his austere demeanor returning. The sports festival will give us the perfect opportunity to see how Detective Grayson interacts with Marcus under pressure. As they planned their observation strategy, Todoroki's mind was already classifying every contact he'd seen between Marcus and his imposing uncle. Marcus addressed him formally. He kept the correct posture while in Naruto's company. Careful, measured responses to queries. This is all reminiscent of his own behavior regarding Endeavor. Todoroki told himself that he would not let another individual to suffer in silence. Not when I can do something about it. The days leading up to the UA Sports Festival transformed the campus into a bustling hub of activity. Students practiced with newfound zeal, plans were developed and abandoned, and anticipation grew with every passing hour. For Class 1A, who were still digesting their meeting with real villains at the USJ, the festival signified a return to normalcy, allowing them to focus on traditional hero training rather than life or death fighting. Todoroki watched from the sidelines as Marcus finished another training session with precision and control. Despite the relaxed atmosphere, Marcus trained with military precision, each repeat identical to the last. Nearby, Evelyn explored molecular manipulation, using her pink energy to create increasingly complicated formations. The two periodically exchanged glances, communicating without words in a way that suggested years of intimacy. They're impressive, Yaoyorozu added, joining Todoroki in his opinion. Their quirk control is remarkable for late bloomers. Too remarkable, Todoroki said quietly. Watch how he holds back. He's not showing his full strength, even in training. Yaoyorozu examined Marcus more closely. You think he's restraining himself deliberately? Why would he do that during preparation for such an important event? Before Todoroki could react, the training session concluded and students began to gather their stuff. His gaze was pulled to the entrance, where several parents had gathered to witness the final day of preparations. Among them stood Naruto and Nolan Grayson, their massive proportions dwarfing the other grown-ups. Marcus and Evelyn approached them quickly, their attitudes changing subtly. Backs straighter, expressions more composed. Todoroki walked closer, ostensibly to retrieve his water bottle, and placed himself within earshot of their talk. "Your control is improving," Naruto said to Marcus, his deep voice ringing through despite his measured tone. "But you're still showing too much." "I understand, Uncle," Marcus said, his customary relaxed approach replaced with something more professional. "I'll hold back further during the actual event." "Not too much," Naruto warned. "You must place well enough to attract attention without using too much power. Balance is essential." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, his look serious. "I won't disappoint you." Naruto's big hand rested briefly on Marcus's shoulder. "You never have." The brief exchange confirmed Todoroki's fears. The pressure to perform, the careful calibration of expectations, and the formal reverence were all hallmarks of a dynamic he was all too familiar with. The sports festival, Todoroki decided, seeing the Grayson family leave together. "That's when I will approach him. When everyone is looking, including his uncle. He needs to know he isn't alone." The morning of the UA Sports Festival was bright and clear, with the stadium packed with fans anxious to see the future generation of heroes in action. Following the USJ incident, security was heightened, with professional heroes stationed throughout the venue. Naruto and Nolan Grayson sat in the VIP section among professional heroes and key officials, getting curious eyes from others who were unfamiliar with them. "Impressive turnout," Nolan said, surveying the filled stadium. "This world certainly loves its spectacle." "A useful cultural trait," Naruto responded, his voice low enough for only Nolan to hear. "Public adoration makes creating your own place easier. Heroes are celebrities here, not just protectors." Present Mike's voice echoed around the stadium, signaling the arrival of the first-year students. As Class 1A filed out to tremendous acclaim, Naruto's gaze was drawn to Marcus and Evelyn amid their peers. "They've integrated well," he noted. "The USJ incident accelerated their acceptance." Nolan nodded. "Mark and Eva are similarly positioned in Class 1B. All four have established the connections we need." "And Samantha?" Naruto asked, referring to war-torn Eve. "Progressing as expected with everything. Her approach is effective, if somewhat intense." Naruto's countenance remained deadpan, but a tinge of pride crept into his voice. "She takes after her father." The preliminaries began with Midnight's spectacular statement. Naruto and Nolan watched the obstacle course challenge from an elevated perch. The ice user, Naruto observed as Todoroki grabbed an early lead and froze the earth behind him. "Endeavor's son. His quirk has significant potential. As does Midoriya's," Nolan continued, admiring the green-haired student's inventive utilization of the robot detritus. "Though his control remains problematic." Marcus and Evelyn remained in the top 10 throughout the race, exhibiting enough competence to impress without doing too much. Their performance was precisely calibrated, fast enough to advance, but not so dominant as to create worries in those experienced enough how university students are close to their symbol of peace in capabilities. "Perfect execution," Naruto said as the race ended. "They understand their roles." As the kids readied for the cavalry clash, Nolan noticed a ruckus several rows away. Endeavor had come, his flame-wreathed body easy to spot as he took his place. "The number 2 hero," Nolan noted. "His son seems determined to reject his legacy." Naruto's gaze briefly strayed to the flame hero before returning to the field. "Family conflict. A vulnerability that can be exploited if left unspoken but heard." The cavalry fight progressed. Marcus and Evelyn had chosen different teams, another planned decision to spread their influence and learn more about their classmates' abilities. When the dust settled and the progressing kids were announced, both had earned spots in the tournament bracket. As did Todoroki and Midoriya. "The matchups will be interesting," Nolan said, as the bracket was presented. Marcus and Todoroki in the second round, assuming they both win their first matches. Naruto nodded with a thoughtful gaze. "A valuable test. The boy has power but lacks control over his emotions. His rejection of half his quirk is inefficient." Speaking of inefficiency, Nolan added with a smile, "Have you noticed how Todoroki has been watching Marcus? There's something beyond competitive assessment there." "Yes," Naruto replied. "He suspects something, I reason. His own experiences with Endeavor have made him sensitive to perceived similarities. Naruto is perceptive and analytical enough to connect the dots. A complication?" Perhaps, Naruto responded, unconcerned. Or an opportunity. We shall see. The tournament's opening round went largely as expected. Marcus vanquished his opponent, a student from Class 1B with a metallization quirk. Todoroki advanced similarly, using solely his ice powers to freeze his opponent in place while causing little physical damage. Commentators and onlookers alike saw his hesitation to use his fire side, especially when Endeavor's booming voice demanded he stop holding back. Evelyn found Marcus in the waiting area as he prepared to face Todoroki. He's been watching you, she said without explanation. Todoroki. Since the USJ incident. Marcus nodded and adjusted his uniform. I've noticed. He seems concerned about something. Uncle Nolan thinks he's suspicious. Nothing about our cover was revealed. That doesn't make sense, Marcus said, frowning slightly. Why would he be suspicious of anything? Evelyn shrugged. Just be careful. He's perceptive, and he has his own agenda regarding his father. I'll handle it, Marcus told her. This match is important for establishing our position here. I won't compromise our future heroic career. The code for their assignment. As their bout came, Marcus made his way to the tunnel that led to the arena. The crowd's shout became louder with each step. Across the stadium, Todoroki was preparing for the upcoming confrontation. This wasn't just about moving further in the tournament. It was about reaching out to someone he believed was caught in a predicament alarmingly similar to his own. They entered the field together, the crowd's enthusiasm flowing over them as they took their positions. As they met eyes across the concrete platform, Present Mike's exuberant introduction faded into the background. Begin! Midnight exclaimed with a crack of her whip. Instead of instantly attacking, Todoroki took a single step forward and said, his voice plainly audible over the stadium's ambient noise. I need to speak with you about your uncle. Marcus blinked, puzzled at the unexpected opening. What? Todoroki unleashed his first ice assault, a rather controlled wave that Marcus easily avoided. I've seen the signs, Todoroki added, directing another ice formation at his opponent. The bruises. The way you talk about him. The arranged relationship. Marcus danced around the ice attacks, trying to figure out what Todoroki was indicating. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, rushing in to deliver a strike that Todoroki barely blocked with his ice shield. You don't have to pretend, Todoroki insisted, his attacks becoming increasingly fierce as his emotional state worsened. I know what it's like. To be someone's project. Someone's creation. To not be your own person, but made an extension of another's. Forcing their will upon you. Marcus's understanding grew as he deflected another ice barrage. He believes Uncle Naruto is abusing me, he realized, surprised yet amused. Marcus responded, you've got it all wrong, and then he hit Todoroki a bunch of times to see how well he could defend himself. I see the bruises, Todoroki said, and then he made an ice wall between them that Marcus broke with a precise stroke. I see the signs. He's using you the same way my father used me. What are you talking about? Marcus said, wanting to know what had made Todoroki think this way. The arranged relationship with your cousin. The brutal training. The expectations. Todoroki's voice got louder as he fired his biggest ice blast yet. You don't have to go through it alone. Marcus stopped for a moment when he heard the earnestness in Todoroki's voice. Todoroki didn't just want to win or make a plan, he thought he was helping. The misunderstanding was almost funny, but the worry underlying it was real. Marcus thought, this could be useful, and chose to listen to Todoroki instead of correcting him right away. Knowing what he's worried about could provide you with useful information and even a way to use it. Let's talk about this, Marcus said, slowing down his attacks on purpose to keep the conversation going. Why do you think my uncle is? What, hurting me? I've lived it, Todoroki said, and his attacks became more random as his feelings came out. My father made me for one reason, to beat All Might. Nothing else mattered to him. Not my childhood, not my mother's sanity, nothing but his ambition. As they kept fighting, a dance of ice and power, Todoroki told more of his story. The perfect marriage is set up for reproducing quirks. The harsh training started when he was 5. His mother's collapse and the scar on his face. Marcus listened, astonished by how deep Todoroki's trauma was. This was useful information, not just about Todoroki but also about Endeavor, the second best hero whose public image hid a lot of private problems. Of course, Marcus did feel sorry for Todoroki and his circumstances. As the match went on, Marcus realized that it needed to end. He had heard enough, and continuing the struggle would put his own skills at risk of being revealed too much. He moved Todoroki toward the edge with a series of carefully planned moves. A last blow that was strong enough to be the deciding factor but not strong enough to hurt Todoroki badly sent him rolling out of bounds. Midnight said, "Todoroki Shoto has been taken out." Marcus Grayson moves on to the semifinals. People cheered, but Marcus's eyes stayed on Todoroki, who was slowly getting up. There was more to talk about, but this wasn't the right place. "Meet me in the waiting room," Marcus murmured gently as he helped Todoroki get up. "We need to finish this talk." "My father planned my birth," Todoroki said as he sat opposite Marcus in the empty waiting room. "He married my mother just to have a child with her powers. When I was born with exactly what he wanted, my siblings didn't matter anymore. I started training before I even knew what was going on." Marcus was interested in what he heard. The similarities to Viltrumite breeding systems were very clear, but Endeavor's methods were rather rough and ineffective. "I turned down his power," Todoroki said, pointing to the left side of his body. "I won't be his tool. And when I saw the signs in your situation, the planned relationship with Evelyn, the talk of genetic compatibility, and producing powerful offspring, the bruises from training, I couldn't stay quiet." Marcus thought carefully about what to say. This misunderstanding was both a problem and a chance. It was important to change Todoroki's mind, but the information concerning Endeavor's maltreatment could help his emperor's bigger purpose. "I appreciate your concern," Marcus said, carefully picking his words. "But I think you don't understand what's going on with my family." He then went on to explain the meticulously planned cover story. How his relationship with Evelyn had grown spontaneously, even though his uncle had told him to. How Naruto's training was hard but agreed upon, and how it was meant to help them get better at their late-blooming idiosyncrasies, another lie that worked for them. How the bruises were from a particular training program he had asked for, technically true, but not in the way Todoroki would see it. Marcus said, "Your situation sounds like real abuse," and he sounded like he cared. "Your father did something wrong when he arranged a quirk marriage, kept your mother away from you, and started your training at such a young age. That's not normal or acceptable." Todoroki seemed unsure as he looked at Marcus's face with his mismatched eyes, looking for any signs of lying. "Are you sure? The way you talk about your uncle, the formality, the expectations." "Military family," Marcus said with a shrug. "We value clear communication and hierarchy. It might seem strange from the outside, but it works for us." Todoroki nodded gently after a while. "I might have jumped to conclusions too quickly. My own experiences changed how I saw things." Understandably, Marcus told him, recognizing a chance to get closer. "Your father did something wrong, Todoroki. Have you ever thought about doing something about it? Legally, I mean?" Todoroki's face closed off a little. "He's the second hero. Who would believe me?" "My uncle would," Marcus said without thinking. "He's a detective with the Special Investigations Division. If what you've told me is true, it's criminal abuse, even if he's a hero." Todoroki's face showed both hope and fear. "Why would he help me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Marcus stated simply, playing the part of the honest hero student flawlessly and believing it. "And because no child should have to go through what you said." Todoroki went to watch the rest of the matches, and Marcus went to get ready for his semifinal encounter. Marcus couldn't help but find the situation funny. Todoroki had come up to him out of real worry, thinking he was going through something similar to what he was going through. Instead, he may have provided the Graysons the perfect chance to bring down one of this world's greatest heroes while making themselves look like heroes to his family. Marcus thought, Uncle Naruto will find this interesting, as he walked nearer where his family was watching. Very interesting, indeed. An unexpected development, Naruto said that night while the family was in the living room. Marcus had just completed telling everyone about his talk with Todoroki, which included all the information concerning Endeavor's abuse. "The boy thought you were being mistreated," Nolan said, sounding a little amused. "Because of how we train." Naruto agreed that, "The irony is great. He tried to save you from a situation that doesn't exist, and in doing so, he showed us a weakness we can use." Evelyn leaned forward a little while sitting next to Marcus on the couch. "Endeavor is the second hero. Discrediting him would hurt people's trust in the hero system a lot." "Exactly," Naruto said, nodding. "And putting ourselves in the role of protectors of his children fits perfectly with our plan to get in." Amanda, who had been quiet, spoke out. "Those poor kids. From what Marcus said, they've been through a lot." Naruto said, "I appreciate your sympathy." His voice softened a little, as it always did when he talked to his wife. "And useful here. They will respond better to real concern. Roberta was already using her iPad, and her fingers were moving faster than they should have been. I'm looking at medical records right now. There should be proof of the abuse, like doctor visits, school reports, and witness accounts that were kept secret since Endeavor was a public figure. Naruto said, "Good. Put everything together. My job with the police gives us the perfect cover for an official investigation." Nolan asked, "What about the kids? We'll have to give Endeavor a place to go if we move against them." Naruto said, "We'll offer to take them in. Temporary guardianship while the legal process goes on. It's the heroic thing to do." Everyone there could see that the plot was well thought out, but there was also a real part to it. The abuse that Todoroki talked about happened, and halting it was good for both their cover and their personal sense of right and wrong. Naruto went on, "The Todoroki kids have useful quirks." His thoughts were already several steps ahead, especially Shoto, who has the perfect mix of fire and ice. Their DNA would be a big help to the Viltrumite breeding program. Should I start getting ready for that part? Roberta said as she wrote down notes on her tablet. Naruto said, "Not right away. First, we build trust. The genetic acquisition can happen later, when they're fully settled into our home. It has to be natural, after all. Our ways aren't barbaric like the Flaming Fools." Mark and Eva, who had been quiet during the whole talk, looked at each other. This was the part of Naruto's intentions that still made them think twice sometimes. The clinical way of collecting genes to make more Viltrumites. Amanda said, "We'll need to get the guest rooms ready. And probably get some more supplies. How many kids do you have?" "4, Roberta said without glancing up from her tablet. "Tuya is thought to have died in an accident. Fuyumi is a 26-year-old woman with an ice quirk. Natsuo is a 23-year-old man with an ice quirk. Shoto is a 19-year-old man with a half-cold and half-hot quirk." Amanda said, "I'll take care of the plans. We should make them feel welcome, no matter what the strategic issues are." Naruto nodded his head in agreement. Nolan turned to Naruto and asked, "How quickly can we move on this?" Naruto said, "I'll start the official investigation tomorrow. With Roberta's proof in my position, we should be able to arrest in a few days." Evelyn asked, "What about the media fallout? The arrest of the second most popular hero for child abuse will cause a lot of people to react." Naruto said, "Which is perfect for our needs. People will lose faith in the hero system, and there will be questions about how heroes are rated. The system's weaknesses will be obvious to everyone." 3 days later, in the early evening, police cars encircled the Todoroki estate. Neighbors came out of their homes and watched in shock as Detective Naruto Grayson led a group of cops to the front door. Endeavor had just gotten back from his agency and was still in his hero suit as he looked over reports in his office. After the doorbell rang, a maid's timid voice told him that the cops wanted to come in. He snarled, "What nonsense is this?" as he stood up from his desk and the flames around his face grew higher. "Get them out of here. I have work to do." A heavy voice at the doorway said, "I'm sorry, Endeavor, but we have a warrant." Naruto stood there, his huge body blocking the door, calmly holding his police badge in front of him. Several officers stood behind him, their faces showing a mix of fear and resolve. "What does this mean?" Endeavor said, his disbelief swiftly turning into anger. "Do you know who I am?" "Enji Todoroki," Naruto said in a calm voice. "Also known as the Flame Hero, Endeavor. He is currently the second best professional hero and is in jail for child abuse, domestic violence, and breaking the rules about quirk marriage." The flames of Endeavor became stronger. "This is crazy. Who would say such things? Medical records, school reports, witness statements, security footage from your own home." Naruto's voice was calm, but his eyes were locked on Endeavor's with unyielding focus. "The evidence is strong and convincing. I am the second hero. How I discipline my family is none of your business." Naruto stepped out and said, "Child abuse is everyone's business." He didn't seem to be in pain or scared, even though Endeavor's flames were all around him. "You will come with us now, or we will charge you with resisting arrest again." For a brief minute, it looked like Endeavor might fight. His flames rose higher, and his huge body tensed as he glared at the investigator who had the nerve to come to his house and challenge him. But something in Naruto's steady gaze, some instinctive recognition of a predator much more dangerous than himself, made him stop. This detective was not like the others. The way he stood there, unaffected by the heat and pressure of Endeavor's peculiarity, made him seem like something more than a normal person. The flames around Endeavor slowly went out, This is a mistake, he muttered, although he didn't sound as sure as before. My lawyer will have this thrown out by morning. Maybe, Naruto said, pulling out special handcuffs that stop quirks. But tonight, you'll be treated like any other suspect in a criminal case. Endeavor saw movement in the corridor as the officers closed in to arrest him. Fuyumi stood there with her eyes wide open in surprise. Natsuo stood behind her with a look on his face that was a mix of shock and something that looked uncomfortably like satisfaction. Shoto stood behind both of them, partly hidden in the darkness. For a brief period, his eyes met his father's, but they didn't show what he was thinking. Naruto went on. Your children will need a place to stay for a while this is worked out. The cops then tied Endeavor's wrists. My brother has said he would take care of me until the courts decide what to do. That's crazy. Endeavor yelled, turning his focus back to Naruto. They will stay in their home, Naruto said quietly. You don't get to make that choice. As a detective who works on domestic cases, something Naruto made sure of since this was a long-time plan, Todoroki just gave the best time for acting. I have the power to take people who might be victims out of a dangerous situation. Nolan Grayson got out of one of the police cars as Endeavor was being carried away, still claiming he was innocent and threatening legal action. He walked over to the other Todoroki kids with a carefully planned look of worry and comfort. He said softly, this must be too much for you, especially to Fuyumi, who seemed the most upset. I know you might not want to leave your home, but we can give you a safe place to stay while this is going on. Why would you help us? Natsuo queried with a hint of doubt. You don't even know us. Nolan said, my son Marcus is friends with your brother. When he told my brother about his worries, we felt like we had to help. No child should have to go through what you did. Fuyumi looked like she was torn. Her gaze went back and forth between her brothers and the big man in front of her who seemed scary but nice. I don't know, everything is happening so fast. Nolan told her, you don't have to make a decision right away, but you shouldn't stay here tonight. The media will come once the news breaks, and you deserve to be alone during this hard time. Shoto, who had been quiet the whole time, eventually spoke. He whispered gently, we should go with him. At least for now. His brothers and sisters looked at him in shock. Are you sure, Shoto? Fuyumi said. Marcus told me about his family, Shoto said. I trust what he says. The Todoroki siblings made their choice and started gathering important things while the media started to show up outside the estate gates. Police officers kept them away while Nolan led the three young people to a car with tinted windows that was waiting for them. Shoto looked out the window as they drove away from the only home he had ever known. His face was unreadable. He felt a deep sense of relief when his father was arrested. Finally, justice was being done after a long time. Another part of them was unsure about what would happen next. It looked like the Grayson family cared and wanted to help. Marcus had been understanding during their talk, and Shoto didn't see any pity or terror in his eyes, which he had been afraid of when he told his story. Maybe this unexpected change of events may lead to something better. An opportunity to mend and reconnect with his brothers and sisters without their father and what he did getting in the way. That night, after the Todoroki siblings had settled into their guest rooms at the Grayson home, Naruto and Nolan stood on the balcony and looked out over the city lights. Nolan looked at his phone and said, the arrest is already getting a lot of news coverage. People are reacting just as you thought they would, with shock, anger, and questions about how the Hero Commission checks its members. Naruto said, humans are predictable when they get angry about morals, especially when their idols fall. This will speed up the loss of faith in their hero system. Nolan said, the Todoroki kids seem damaged, with a note of real worry in his voice. She blames herself for not being able to protect her brothers better, especially the girl. Naruto said, their psychological trauma makes them easier to manipulate. There was a hint of fear behind that, though. After years of abuse, they will quickly become attached to people who are nice to them. Izuku's point of view. I am Izuku Midoriya, and I have always desired to be a hero. For most of my life, that dream seemed impossible. It's not easy to be a hero when 80% of people have superpowers and you don't. But everything changed when I met All Might. He gave me his power, one for all, and suddenly the unthinkable became feasible. I thought I knew what it meant to be a hero. I thought I knew what to do next. I was mistaken. The first day at UA was not what I thought it would be. The entrance exam was tough but in a way kind of expected. Then came Aizawa-sensei's quirk test, which turned my life upside down. Use your quirks freely, he added, looking at us with bloodshot eyes that showed he didn't care. The last person will be kicked out right away. I started to panic when I realized I couldn't control one for all yet. Every use meant fractured bones. I actually felt I was going to get kicked out of school. For almost 20 years, I had been praying and hoping to become a hero, but when my time arrived, this teacher pulled the floor out from under me. As we proceeded through the exams, I stayed scoreless, watching everyone else display abilities they'd had years to master. I sensed Aizawa-sensei's quirk obliterate mine right before I was going to activate it during the ball throw. After his speech about not being a liability, I managed one finger-powered throw that put me in the middle of the pack, but the pain was severe. When the final rankings emerged, my heart fell. I came in last. Dead last. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion, Aizawa-sensei said in a nonchalant tone. It was a smart trick to get you to do your best. The relief was great, but short-lived. Kachan cornered me as the class broke up, and his hands were shaking with rage. Deku, he yelled. All these years you've been lying to me. What the hell kind of quirk is that? How did a worthless nobody like you get into UA? I knew an explosion was coming, so I readied myself for it when a hand grabbed Kachan's shoulder. That's enough, the voice said in a calm but very authoritative way. I looked up and saw one of the Grayson cousins, Marcus, whom I recognized from introductions. He was taller than Kachan and had a comfortable yet somehow menacing stance. Get your hand off me, extra, Kachan growled, small explosions popping from his palms. Marcus just stood there, completely unfazed. We're in the same class now. No matter what happened between you two before, threatening him here at school just isn't cool. There was something in his tone that even Kachan found himself pausing over. After a bit of a tense moment, he just shrugged off Marcus's hand. Whatever. This isn't over, Deku. He turned and walked away, leaving behind an awkward silence. Thanks, I said, feeling a bit embarrassed for needing help on my first day. Marcus smiled, and all that intensity from earlier just faded away. No worries. I'm Marcus Grayson. Nice to meet you. I'm Izuku Midoriya, I said, even though he likely already knew from our class introductions. Wow, that was impressive, what you did with the ball, he said as we strolled toward the main building. Concentrating your strength into just one finger? That's some smart strategy right there. I was surprised by the compliment. Oh, thanks, I'm still figuring out how to control it. Late blooming quirk? He asked. I paused for a moment. Just taking a shot in the dark, Marcus said, catching my reaction. You know, my cousin and I are kind of late bloomers as well. Our quirks just started showing up not too long ago. No way. I couldn't mask my astonishment. It felt like he had everything under control during the tests. It's definitely a bit of a challenge, huh? He grinned again, and I could feel myself starting to unwind. If you're ever up for training together, just give me a shout. It could be nice to team up with someone who gets what it's like to be in catch-up mode. That was the start of a friendship I never saw coming. The next few weeks flew by with a mix of classes, training, and slowly getting to know my classmates. Marcus and I hit the gym together a few times, and his cousin Evelyn joined us too. Both of them were talented, even though their quirks had just recently shown up. You know, it's all about focus, Marcus said one afternoon while we were practicing at one of UA's training grounds. Having power without control is just a recipe for chaos. I saw him show off a precision strike on a concrete block, breaking it apart right along the lines we had marked out. My uncle always said that control is what matters most, and power comes after that, he continued. You know, breaking things is easy. The real talent lies in figuring out just the right amount of force to use. Your uncle seems wise, I said, trying to copy his stance. Yeah, he is, Marcus said, nodding in agreement. Sometimes, his methods might come off as a bit intense to those looking in from the outside. I was just thinking about All Might's training, you know, making me haul trash from a beach for 10 months straight. I understand. My mentor once had me clean an entire beach full of trash as part of my training. Marcus chuckled. It's a different approach, but the same principle. You've got to build the foundation before you add the power. He observed me as I tried to make the strike. That's better. Just try to shift your weight a bit more through your center. While we were training, I saw Evelyn focusing on her molecular manipulation. She was crafting more and more intricate structures with her pink energy, which Marcus also incorporated into his training. I noticed that your quirks complement each other, I said while we took a water break. Absolutely, Evelyn nodded in agreement. Marcus brings the raw power, while I focus on precision. When we team up, we get things done. That's why Uncle Naruto thought we'd get along well, Marcus said with a laid-back vibe. Compatible? I repeated, feeling a bit puzzled. As partners, Evelyn said with a smile at Marcus. He suggested that we think about a relationship since our skills complement each other. Oh, my cheeks started to feel warm. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I know it sounds a bit odd, Marcus said, but it made sense for us. We were already good friends, and the genetic compatibility was just a nice little extra. Something about the way it was phrased felt a bit off to me, but just as I was about to dig deeper, Evelyn switched topics. Izuku, you should come over for dinner one of these days. Our family would love to meet you. Oh, that sounds awesome. You know, I had no idea that accepting that dinner invitation would kick off a journey that would shake up my understanding of what it means to be a hero. The Grayson family home was quite something. It had a spacious, modern vibe, all while fitting perfectly into the calm of the neighborhood without being too showy. Evelyn welcomed me at the door and led me inside, where the delightful aroma of cooking wafted through the air. Izuku. A woman with short brown hair came over, beaming with a friendly smile. I'm Amanda, Naruto's wife. We've heard a lot about you. Thanks for having me, Mrs. Grayson, I said, feeling a bit nervous. Just Amanda, please, she said, leading me into the living room where Marcus was talking to a man who had to be his father. They looked alike, sharing the same build and features, but there was something about the older man's presence that felt a bit different. I'm not quite sure how to put it into words. Just a bit more. Dad, this is Izuku, Marcus said as we got closer. Nolan Grayson stood up to say hello, giving me a handshake that was strong yet gentle, almost like he was being mindful of how much pressure to use. Izuku, Marcus has told me great things about how sharp you were with your analysis. I felt my cheeks heat up at the compliment. Thanks a lot, I've always found quirk analysis interesting. That's a useful skill, Nolan agreed. It's important to get a grip on what you can do and what you can't when it comes to strategic thinking. While we were settling in, I spotted another woman coming in from what looked like a home office. She moved with a kind of smoothness, her face thoughtful as she took me in. This is Roberta, my best friend. She's basically like a sister to me, Amanda said with a smile. She's the tech whiz in our family. Great to meet you. I said with a little bow. You too, Roberta replied. She came across as someone who didn't say much. During dinner, I couldn't help but be intrigued by how the family interacted with each other. They worked together in a way that was just incredible, passing dishes before anyone even had to ask, knowing what each other needed, and sometimes just sharing a look to communicate. Is your uncle coming along? I asked, recalling how often Marcus talked about him. Dad's working late, Evelyn said. So, he's a detective in the Special Investigations Division, and it seems like they've been busy with their cases lately. Nolan mentioned, he's dedicated to his work. Maybe I get a little too dedicated at times. That's impressive, I said. I'm dedicated to helping people out. Marcus shared a look with his dad that left me a bit puzzled. Uncle Naruto sees helping people in a way that's a bit different from what you might expect. He thinks that finding long-term solutions is way better than just putting a band-aid on things. Could you clarify what you mean? So, let's talk about the hero system, Marcus said, putting his fork down. Heroes jump into action when crises hit, villains make their move, and heroes step up. But that's more of a reaction than a plan. It doesn't tackle the reasons behind why people turn into villains to begin with. But isn't that not what heroes are supposed to do? I replied. They're there to keep people safe when trouble comes up. And that's exactly the limitation, Nolan chimed in effortlessly. A system that just reacts to issues instead of stopping them from happening won't ever bring about real, lasting peace. But you know, All Might has brought peace, I said, wanting to stand up for my mentor. After he became the symbol of peace, crime rates took a nosedive. Did they? Roberta asked, sounding more curious about what I said than ready to argue. So, did they just change shape? You know, stats show that even though violent crime went down, other kinds of societal issues popped up. It seems like the symbol brings a bit of stability by making people afraid of the consequences, rather than actually tackling the real problems. I started to say something, but then I just shut my mouth, not quite sure how to argue back. Alright everyone, let's pause for a moment, Amanda said, stepping in to halt the chatter. We're not criticizing All Might, Amanda said softly, turning her face towards me, maybe picking up on my unease. He's done some amazing work and saved a lot of lives. Definitely a guy who deserves recognition for what he's done. Sorry about that, Aunt Amanda, and you too, Izuku, Marcus said. I've just been thinking a lot after hearing all the stories about my uncle's detective work. You know, I think an effective leader wouldn't just react to crises. They'd actually work to reshape society to avoid them in the first place. They'd focus on uplifting people, not just keeping them safe. But hey, that's just how I see it. Feel free to take it or leave it. After that, we moved on to some lighter topics, but their words stuck with me well after dinner was over. In the coming weeks, I ended up hanging out with the Graysons more often. Marcus and I would often train together, and sometimes Evelyn would join us. Every now and then, Marcus's twin brother Mark and Evelyn's twin sister Eva from Class 1B would tag along too. So, after an intense session, Marcus was like, "How about we grab some drinks at that cafe nearby?" Once we got comfortable with our drinks, we started chatting about the internships that are coming up after the sports festival. "So, have you figured out who you want to apply to work with?" Marcus asked. I just shook my head. Not yet, I'm still looking into my options. Honestly, I was a bit anxious about the few offers I might get after my performance at the sports festival. I'm still struggling to control one for all without hurting myself. You know, the whole internship system is pretty interesting, Marcus said, giving his drink a thoughtful stir. It's great for students to learn directly from the pros, but it also kind of keeps things the same without challenging the status quo. Could you clarify that for me? Just consider this for a moment. You're picking up lessons from those who have made it big in the current system. They show you how to do things their way, which ends up keeping the same methods and limitations going. I made a little frown. Isn't that what it's all about? Learning from those who have been in the field? I agree, experience is super valuable, Marcus said. You know, innovation is important too. The hero system hasn't changed much in decades, even though society has moved on. At some point, we should consider if there's a better approach out there. What do you mean? Marcus leaned in a bit. What if we had a more unified approach instead of heroes spread out across different agencies, all vying for rankings and popularity? Imagine a single, coordinated system that could deploy resources more effectively. Are you talking about heroes that are controlled by the government? That thought didn't sit well with me. That might open the door to corruption or misuse of power. It's not under government control, Marcus explained. What if there was someone out there who could see the big picture and bring everything together? Someone who could guide heroes to where they're truly needed instead of just having them focus on popularity and rankings. I thought about this. It has to be someone you can trust, you know? Someone who has genuine integrity and a bit of wisdom. Marcus agreed, looking pretty happy with what I said. A leader who steps up not for their own benefit or fame, but because they truly care about uplifting society. They're the ones who can tackle tough choices when the time calls for it. I couldn't shake off the conversation even after we went our separate ways. Do you think the hero system was as flawed as Marcus claimed? I've always looked up to heroes like All Might, who represent hope and peace. But I can't help but wonder, is that enough for lasting change? It was a bit uncomfortable, but definitely an interesting thought to ponder. I've always been open to different perspectives, especially since I've had a long-standing interest in heroes and the world around us. Young Midoriya, I can see your control getting better, All Might said with a smile during one of our private training sessions. Getting 5% consistently is great progress. I appreciated the compliments, but I couldn't help feeling a bit frustrated with how slowly I was moving forward. Thanks, All Might. I've been working on those techniques you taught me. He nodded and momentarily transformed back into his muscular self, showing off a series of moves, then deflated back to his usual appearance in a puff of steam. Just a quick reminder that having a solid foundation is super important. One for All is a power that gets stronger with every generation. All Might, I said a bit nervously, can I ask you something? Sure thing, kiddo. What do you think about the hero system? Do you feel like it's doing its job, or is there room for improvement? All Might seemed taken aback by the question. That's pretty deep for a combat training session, he laughed. You know, the system isn't flawless. Nothing made by humans is. But it's done a pretty good job for society, offering us both security and a bit of inspiration. Is it the best idea to wait for villains to show up before we respond? Shouldn't we focus on stopping villainy before it even starts? His expression turned a bit more serious. Prevention matters, right? That's why heroes get involved in community outreach, education programs, and all sorts of initiatives, not just battling villains. It just seems more reactive than proactive, I said, not even noticing I was repeating Marcus's words. We tend to wait for problems to pop up instead of tackling the conditions that lead to them. All Might paused for a bit, looking at me with a look I couldn't quite figure out. Those are some pretty complex questions, young Midoriya. The hero system has changed a lot over the years to find a balance between keeping people safe and allowing them their freedom. If there's too much control just to prevent things, it could end up feeling oppressive. I get that, I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure I did, not. I'm just curious if there's a better way to do this. The best way to improve any system is from within, All Might said, giving my shoulder a reassuring pat. That's why I picked you to take over. I believe you have what it takes to not only carry on my work but to also adapt it as society changes. His words were meant to be comforting, but they came off more like a way to dodge the real issue instead of providing a clear answer. Everything changed after the USJ incident. We were just touring the facility with 13, soaking up all the details about the rescue operations. A bunch of villains came spilling out of a dark portal, and at the front was this guy all covered in disembodied hands. So there I was, suddenly teleported to the shipwreck zone with Asui, and my first thought was just about staying alive. We took down the villains and made our way back to the central plaza, but what we saw there was just awful. Aizawa-sensei was beaten nearly to death by this monstrous creature the villains referred to as Nomu. When the hand-covered villain, Shigaraki, focused on us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in big trouble. Then Marcus and Evelyn showed up, stepping right in between us and the danger. What happened next still sticks with me. They took on the Nomu, this creature made to take down All Might, and I was blown away by how well they worked together and the strength they showed. I'd never seen anything like it from them before. It felt like Marcus's strength could match even a weakened All Might. And then there was Evelyn with her mind-blowing molecular manipulation, which was both impressive and a bit scary. They worked together to take down the monster, with Marcus making sure to crush its head so it wouldn't come back to life. It worked well. That's harsh, it's important, but that's not what heroes are meant to do. Heroes don't go around killing, not even when it comes to monsters like the Nomu. Did they? Once All Might showed up and the villains made their getaway, Marcus and Evelyn just fell over from sheer tiredness. They went to Recovery Girl with Aizawa-sensei, while the rest of us got the debriefing. I stopped by to see them later in the infirmary. They were both aware of what was happening, but you could tell they were worn out. You all were incredible, I said, still trying to wrap my head around what I had just seen. So, about how you took down the Nomu. We did what we had to do, Marcus said, sounding a bit worn out but resolute. They made it to take down All Might. Trying to use non-lethal methods just wouldn't have worked. You know, heroes typically don't kill. Evelyn echoed. Sometimes, there just isn't a choice, Izuku. When you're up against something that threatens existence, you have to be ready to do whatever it takes to keep innocent lives safe. I felt the urge to argue, to say there had to be another way, but the image of Aizawa-sensei's broken body held my words back. When I stepped out of the infirmary, I spotted All Might hanging out in the hallway. Young Midoriya, he said, his voice sounding a bit more serious than usual. I think we should have a chat. He took me to a private room, making sure we were alone before he shut the door. So, your classmates did some interesting stuff today. He started, then took a moment, as if he was piecing together what he wanted to say. It brings up questions I was hoping you wouldn't have to deal with just yet. They took out the Nomu, I said straightforwardly. That's not what heroes are supposed to do. All Might let out a deep sigh, shrinking down to his real self. You know, the world isn't always so clear-cut, my boy. Sometimes, a hero has to make tough choices. He shared with me about All for One. This villain with incredible power who could take and use multiple quirks. So, there was that epic battle with All Might, right? That fight was the one that caused his crippling injury, and it ultimately led to All for One's demise. I didn't want to kill him, All Might confessed, his tired eyes filled with regret. I looked for another option, but he was just too dangerous, too strong, and way too into causing chaos. Ultimately, it was a choice between him and a whole lot of innocent lives. So you? I just couldn't get the words out. Yeah, All Might nodded seriously. I did what I had to do, but I still feel the heaviness of that choice. You know, young Midoriya, being a hero often means facing tough decisions and dealing with what comes next. I walked away from that chat feeling all mixed up in my head. The hero I had looked up to my whole life had committed murder. My classmates had done something terrible. They both thought it was important to do this to keep others safe. So, where was the line drawn? When did what is necessary start feeling like too much? Things felt pretty odd in the days after the USJ incident. The school was closed for a bit while they worked on upgrading security. When we got back, you could feel the tension in the air with both the students and the faculty. So, Marcus and Evelyn definitely got mixed reactions from our classmates. Some people seemed to look at them with a bit more respect, while others were a little more cautious around them. They had proven they could be deadly, and that shifted how people viewed them. It definitely shifted my perspective on them, but not in a bad way. I came to see that there was something comforting in knowing they would go to any lengths to keep others safe, even if it meant stepping over boundaries that most heroes wouldn't touch. So, after classes kicked back in, I couldn't help but think about this guy I'd heard a lot about, Detective Naruto Grayson. I ran into him when he visited UA for a meeting with Principal Nezu and Aizawa-sensei about Marcus and Evelyn's actions at USJ, and then I bumped into him again on the street while I was picking up some groceries. It's a small world, isn't it? I immediately thought that no photograph could capture his presence. That's exactly what I was thinking just now. He stood at more than 7 feet tall, looming over everyone else, his muscular build comparable to All Might in his powered form. It wasn't just his size that caught your eye, there was something about him that drew you in, making you sit up a little straighter and think twice about what you were going to say. "Oh, Midoriya," he said, his deep voice echoing in my chest even though he wasn't speaking too loudly. "It's great to run into you here." "Why yeah, sure, sir," I said, finally getting why even Kachan was quiet around him. "Great to finally meet you." He gave me a quick look with his sharp, assessing eyes. "I heard you were there during the USJ incident. I appreciated your quick thinking in preventing casualties." I repeated what he mentioned in the meeting, aware that he was just being courteous and trying to keep the conversation going, so I mirrored my previous response. "I didn't do as much as Marcus and Evelyn," I said. "Every role has its own worth," he said. "A team shines when everyone knows what they're good at and where they might need a little help." His speech had this captivating rhythm, with every word carefully picked and spoken with a calm confidence. "How about joining us for dinner this weekend?" he asked out of the blue. "I'm interested in hearing your take on what happened." "Oh, I'd be honored," I said, a bit taken aback by the invitation. "Great. Saturday at 7 works." He gave a small nod and walked away, leaving me with this odd feeling like I had just gone through a test I didn't even realize was happening. Dinner at the Grayson residence with Detective Naruto was a whole different experience. The family's typical efficient coordination seemed to improve, as if everyone subconsciously modified their conduct in his presence. "Izuku, thank you for joining us," Naruto said as we sat down to dinner. "I've been curious to meet the young man my nephews and doubters speak of so highly." "Thank you for inviting me, sir," I responded, attempting not to stare. Up close, his presence was much more intimidating, despite his efforts to appear affable. "I understand you're All Might's protege," he added, serving himself with exact movements. "An interesting choice for the symbol of peace." I almost choked on my water. What makes you say that?" "Your quirk bears remarkable similarities to his, and you and him appear quite close. The man isn't one that is subtle in his approach. What's interesting is that you still struggle with control in a way that suggests it will be difficult to teach you." His stare met mine, probing but not angry. Seeing my mouth somewhat agape at his diagnosis, he added, "I'm a detective, Izuku. Observation is my profession." For a horrifying moment, I feared he had figured out the one for all secret. However, his following statements indicated a different conclusion. Late-blooming quirks often manifest with unusual power but require significant adjustment. Marcus and Evelyn have experienced similar challenges. Relief rushed over me, but I felt a tinge of shame about the deception. Yes, that's exactly it. Of course, he would be unaware of one for all, as it is a power that violates the majority of quirk ideas. "I'm not sure what I was thinking. Your analytical abilities compensate admirably for your control issues," he said later. "Marcus tells me you maintain extensive notes on hero quirks and strategies." "I've always been fascinated by how different quirks work," I told him. "Understanding their mechanics helps develop effective counter-strategies." "A valuable perspective," Naruto said, nodding. "Many focus solely on increasing their power without considering how to apply it most effectively." As supper progressed, the talk shifted to the hero system, which seemed to pique Naruto's attention, as I expected given that Marcus appears to have learned it from his uncle. Marcus, from what I can tell, is more concerned with what his uncle thinks of him than Mark, Evelyn, or Eva. "What do you think is the purpose of heroes, Izuku?" questioned the man. "To protect people," I responded immediately. "To save those who need saving and stop those who would harm others." A noble sentiment, Naruto stated. But is protection alone sufficient? Or should heroes aspire to something more fundamental? Like what? Elevation, he said, the term bearing a meaning I didn't quite understand. Not merely protecting society as it is, but helping it evolve into something better. Something that requires less protection. That sounds more like a politician's job than a hero's, I remarked nervously. Naruto's lips curved slightly into a smile. Perhaps the distinction is artificial. True leadership, whether from heroes, politicians, or others, should ultimately serve the same purpose, the advancement of society toward its highest potential. But who decides what that highest potential is? I inquired, interested. Therein lies the fundamental question, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on mine. In our current system, no one does, at least not cohesively. Heroes protect, politicians legislate, educators teach, all with different visions and priorities, often working at cross purposes despite shared goals. You're suggesting there should be, what? A single vision. I'm suggesting that fragmented authority creates fragmented results. A house divided against itself cannot stand, as the saying goes. I considered it. But unified authority can lead to tyranny if the wrong person holds power. Indeed, Naruto said, surprising me. Which is why character matters above all else in leadership. Power without wisdom is mere force. Wisdom without power is mere philosophy. The ideal leader possesses both in equal measure, along with the moral clarity to use them properly. His remarks spoke to something deep within me, a conviction in the possibility of genuine, transformative leadership that went beyond the constraints of the current system. As I departed that night, I wondered if such a leader existed. And if they did, how would they look? How would they change our world? The sports festival came and went, and Marcus defeated Todoroki in a match that appeared to entail more than simply competition. Something happened between them, a talk I couldn't hear from the stands but which definitely upset Todoroki deeply. In the aftermath, speculations about Endeavor spread. Whispers at first, followed by increasingly concrete claims. Child abuse, domestic violence, a quirk marriage, is intended to generate the perfect heir. When the police finally apprehended him, led by Detective Naruto himself, the hero community descended into pandemonium. The number 2 hero, who had solved more crimes and apprehended more villains than anyone, even All Might, was discovered to be a domestic abuser who had terrorized his own family for years. While the legal proceedings were underway, the Todoroki siblings temporarily relocated to the Graysons' home. I went once and found Shoto more relaxed than I had ever seen him, despite the circumstances. We are not very close, yet it felt appropriate to pay him a visit as a classmate. It's strange, he said as we sat in the Graysons' garden. I spent years hating him, and now that everyone knows the truth, I feel, I don't know, not happy, exactly, but lighter somehow. The Graysons seem to be taking good care of you, I remembered saying. They are, Shoto confirmed. Detective Grayson especially. He's not what I expected. How so? Shoto took his words carefully. He's powerful, maybe even more than my father, but he uses that power differently. I've seen him train Marcus and Mark and there's no cruelty in the way he uses his power. Just purpose. I nodded, fully knowing what he meant. Naruto exuded confidence. He appeared to know exactly what he was doing and why. Marcus says you're working on something for the internships. Shoto shifted the conversation. Oh, yeah, I said, excited to discuss my proposal. After USJ, I realized how vulnerable we all are when separated. So I'm developing communication devices for emergencies, something that can send a distress signal to each other for if we're in trouble. Smart, Shoto said, nodding in approval. The pros won't always be there to help. Exactly. I'm distributing them to our classmates before internships start. Just in case. Who receives the signal? Initially I thought just each other, and the police in general, but Marcus suggested including his uncle too specifically. As a high-ranking detective, he could mobilize police response quickly. Good idea, Shoto agreed. After seeing him arrest my father, I believe Detective Grayson could handle just about anything. The distribution of my emergency equipment went better than anticipated. Everyone in class accepted it, including Kachan, who declared he'd never need to call for backup like some loser. These are impressive, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu said, inspecting the small device. The signal range must be substantial. It uses cellular networks where available, you replied, but can also transmit directly if necessary. The battery should last several weeks on standby. And it alerts all of us, including Detective Grayson. Iida verified as he attached the gadget to his suit. Yes, it sends your GPS coordinates automatically when activated. Iida nodded sincerely. A prudent precaution. Thank you, Midoriya. I had no idea how quickly that precaution would be tested, or how it would affect everything. My internship at Gran Torino started awkwardly. The elderly hero looked displeased with my performance, continuously encouraging me to use One for All more effectively. You're thinking about it all wrong, he yelled, knocking me down for the 12th time. One for All isn't something separate from you, it's part of you. Stop treating it like a special move and start treating it like a natural extension of yourself. His training was rigorous, but effective. By the end of the first week, I was able to sustain full cowling at 5% and disperse power throughout my body rather than concentrating it in one arm. Then came news of Hero Killer, Stain. I ultimately learned that his latest victim was Ingenium, Iida's brother. Though he survived, his heroic career was over, and his legs were permanently injured. I tried calling Iida, but he didn't pick up. His texts were brief and polite, telling me that he was well and focused on his internship in Hosu City. Something felt odd. I knew Iida, how much he loved his brother and was proud of the Ingenium legacy. This detached response was completely out of character for him. When Hosu City erupted in disarray, with many Nomu attacks wreaking havoc throughout various districts, I realized something was seriously wrong. Gran Torino and I were on a train passing through Hosu when the attacks started. Despite his instructions to keep still, I couldn't ignore what was going on. I jumped from the train, trusting my intuition, and used full cowling to soften the landing. The city was in disarray. Heroes and police rushed to stop the Nomu attacks, but civilians fled in terror. Using my phone's GPS, I attempted to locate Iida, who was somewhere nearby, finally leading me to a narrow alley away from the main battle. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Iida lay on the ground with a sword pinning his arm to the pavement. A gaunt creature with a torn scarf and multiple blades, Hero Killer, Stain, stood over him. And he was about to administer what appeared to be a fatal blow. Stop, I exclaimed, propelling myself forward with full cowling. My kick took Stain off guard and pushed him away from Iida. Landing between them, I swiftly surveyed the situation. Iida was harmed, but he survived. Another pro-hero, Native, lay motionless close. Midoriya, Iida gasped. Why are you here? I was worried about you, I said, maintaining my gaze on Stain. Your behavior didn't seem right after what happened to your brother. Leave, Iida commanded. This is my fight, my responsibility. A child seeking revenge, Stain's raspy voice burst through our conversation. Playing at being a hero while pursuing a personal vendetta. This is what's wrong with hero society today. Shut up, Iida exclaimed. You have no right to talk about heroes after what you've done. Stain's eyes narrowed. I have every right. I'm purging this society of false heroes, those who seek fame, fortune, and glory rather than true justice. Only All Might embodies the ideal of a true hero, selfless, driven by genuine desire to protect rather than personal gain. You're just a murderer, I protested, yet something about his remarks struck me as strangely familiar. I'm a necessary correction to a corrupt system, Stain explained. Sometimes society needs to be shocked into remembering what truly matters. He moved with terrifying speed, his blade slicing toward me. I narrowly escaped. As we fought, I recognized I was outmatched. His experience and speed far outpaced my beginner talents, even with full cowling. A slash grabbed my arm, and I felt my body stiffen. His quirk is some form of paralysis caused by swallowing blood. As I slumped, unable to move, Stain approached Iida again. False heroes deserve death. You came seeking revenge, not justice. You're no different from the corruption I'm fighting against. You're wrong, I managed to gasp through the paralysis. Iida made a mistake, but that doesn't define him. True heroes can acknowledge their errors and grow from them. Stain stopped and inspected me. You have potential, child. A purer heart than most who wear the title, hero. But potential isn't enough in a system designed to corrupt. He raised his blade above Iida, and in that moment of panic, I recalled the emergency device. With tremendous effort, I was able to press the button on my belt. A signal was sent. Help was on the way, if it wasn't already too late. The hero system is broken, Stain said, clearly not in a hurry to conclude his assignment. It produces fame seekers and glory hounds instead of true protectors. Only All Might stands above the corruption, a singular pillar holding up a rotting structure. And what happens when that pillar falls? I inquired, hoping to buy time. All Might won't be around forever. Then perhaps society needs to collapse and be rebuilt, Stain responded. Sometimes destruction is necessary for rebirth. A shadow swept overhead, indicating something traveling at amazing speeds. Before Stain could respond, a gigantic figure dropped between us, cracking the concrete. Detective Naruto Grayson stood at full height, towering over Stain. He wore no hero costume, just his usual suit and tie, and yet he appeared more intimidating than any pro-hero I had ever seen. Hero killer, Naruto said, his voice cool. Your activities end tonight. Stain's eyes widened slightly, the first indication of uncertainty I'd seen from him. You're not a hero, he noted. Police. Detective Naruto Grayson, Special Investigations Division, Naruto stated. I heard what you just stated as I arrived. Your methodology is flawed, though your diagnosis has merit. This appeared to surprise Stain. You agree the system is corrupt. I agree it is inefficient, Naruto explained. But indiscriminate killing is equally inefficient. True reform requires precision, not bloodshed. Stain's expression stiffened. Words without action are meaningless. The system protects itself. Only by cutting out the cancer can healing begin. Perhaps, Naruto said, his posture serene despite facing one of Japan's most wanted criminals. But your approach lacks vision. You remove what you perceive as corruption without offering an alternative. Destruction without creation is mere chaos. Stain's eyes narrowed. And what would you suggest, detective? Working within a broken system. Politely asking false heroes to change their ways. I recommend elevation over elimination, Naruto responded. Society can be guided toward better versions of itself without, again, needless bloodshed. Something flickered across Stain's face, either recognition or interest. Whatever it was, he instantly regained his determination and tightened his hold on his swords. Enough talk, Stain yelled. If you stand with the false heroes, you'll fall with them. He moved with blazing speed, slicing at Naruto's throat. What occurred next appeared impossible. Naruto did not dodge or block. He merely stayed still. The blades hit his neck and shattered like glass, leaving him fully unhurt. Stain stumbled back, shocked. What? My quirk, Naruto said quietly, makes me rather difficult to injure. Now, will you surrender peacefully, or must I use force? The hero killer responded with another attack, a flurry of strikes that would have overpowered most professionals. Naruto evaded them with minimal movement, his expression unchanging, as if he were just amusing a child's tantrum. Your conviction is admirable, Naruto said, seizing Stain's wrist in mid-strike. But misapplied. With seemingly no effort, he raised Stain by his captured arm. The hero killer fought and slashed with his free hand, but each strike bounced harmlessly off Naruto's body. The heroes are coming, Naruto said, nodding toward the street, which now had emergency lights visible. Your crusade ends tonight, Stain hissed, twisting in Naruto's grip to deliver a kick to his chest that would have fractured ribs on a normal person. Naruto did not even blink. Impressive flexibility, he added. But futile. A thunderous roar from above caught our attention. One of the winged Nomu had noticed us and dove into the lane with claws extended. As it approached, Stain seized the chance, breaking out of Naruto's clutches with a dislocated shoulder and jumping at the beast. Freedom is not yours to take, he exclaimed, his swords blazing as he sliced at the Nomu. The creature grasped Stain in midair, wrapping its gigantic claws around his torso as it continued to ascend. For a minute, I believed the hero killer would flee, but then Naruto moved. He didn't run or jump. Rather, he simply opted to be somewhere else. He was alongside me one instant and then he was in the air above the Nomu, plummeting forcefully. His hand closed around Nomu's neck and twisted in a single, swift move. The crack resonated through the alley as the creature's head turned nearly 180 degrees. Its wings collapsed immediately, sending all three tumbling back to the ground. Naruto landed first and absorbed the impact with his bowed knees. He seized the falling Nomu with one arm and Stain with the other, lowering them with remarkable ease. The Nomu was definitely dead, with its head lolling at an unusual position. Stain, on the other hand, was only stunned and was now firmly gripped by Naruto. Remarkable, Stain wheezed through what I assumed were shattered ribs. You're not like the others. You have true power, and the conviction necessary for needed action. I do, Naruto responded simply. Then why serve this corrupt system? Stain questioned. With your strength, you could reshape society. Force it to remember what heroes should truly be. Perhaps I am reshaping it, Naruto said cryptically. Just not through your methods. News helicopters flew overhead, their searchlights illuminating the lane. Cameras focused on the scene, showing Naruto clutching the captured hero killer, the dead Nomu nearby, and Iida and me lying paralyzed on the ground. Stain appeared to notice the crowd, his eyes blazing with fresh determination. Listen, all of you, he cried, his voice clear despite his injuries. The word, hero, has lost all meaning in this society. They're not protecting people because it's right, they're doing it for money, for fame, for self-aggrandizement. Naruto made no move to silence him, instead watching with what appeared to be intellectual attention. Only All Might is worthy of the title, Stain exclaimed, blood spraying from his lips. Only he embodies what a true hero should be. The rest are imposters, parasites feeding off society's fear and admiration. His eyes bulged, and veins stood out on his brow as he delivered his manifesto to the cameras above. This false hero society must be purged, rebuilt. The weak pretenders must fall so true heroism can rise again. As Stain's outburst concluded, the pro-heroes finally came, led by Endeavor, recently restored despite the continuing abuse case. They discovered an odd scene. Naruto quietly restraining Stain, who had finally fainted from his injuries. The deceased Nomu laying nearby, and Iida, native, and I am still paralyzed by Stain's quirk. Detective Grayson, Endeavor replied stiffly, flames blazing higher around his features. This is outside police jurisdiction. Hero matters should be left to heroes. Perhaps, Naruto said quietly, but when a distress signal comes from a student, response time matters more than jurisdiction. He motioned toward me, young Midoriya's emergency device alerted me to the situation. Endeavor's eyes narrowed, but he did not protest further. The media presence made confrontation risky, especially considering his vulnerable public image following the assault claims. While paramedics treated our injuries and cops secured Stain, I found myself watching Naruto. There was an almost. He appeared comfortable with his behavior, as if events had transpired in a way that delighted him. Well, he had just saved 2 pupils and a hero from being killed, which was something to be proud of, I reasoned. Gran Torino arrived shortly after, berating me for jumping off the train while expressing grudging support for my initiative. The paralysis from Stain's quirk eventually subsided, allowing me to stand with help. You took an enormous risk, young man, Naruto commented as he came to check on me. But your concern for your friend was admirable. Thank you for coming, I said sincerely. If you hadn't, the device you created served its purpose, he told me. A practical solution to a potential vulnerability. You have good instincts, Izuku. The compliment warmed me, even though I thought I hardly earned it. I had rushed in with no plan and ended up paralyzed, leaving Naruto to handle everything. I would like to inquire about Stain's comments regarding the potential corruption of the hero system. Do you believe there is any validity to that perspective? Naruto contemplated the question with great thoughtfulness. Every system established by fallible individuals contains imperfections. The hero system promotes specific behaviors, some advantageous, others less desirable. The critical inquiry is whether these imperfections overshadow the benefits and if a superior alternative is available. And does it? I inquired. Is there a more effective option? Our eyes connected, and for an instant, I sensed I was gazing into something profound and timeless. The answer is contingent upon individual values. Is it security, freedom, or progress that holds the most significance? Various systems emphasize distinct outcomes. What do you consider to be your highest priority? I inquired, surprising myself with my assertiveness. Elevation, he responded, reiterating the term once more. The ongoing advancement of society towards its utmost potential. Safety without regression, liberty without disorder, development with intention. Before I could inquire about the practical implications, the paramedics insisted on transporting me to the hospital for observation. As I was being loaded into the ambulance, I observed Naruto engaging with the police officials, his imposing presence effortlessly drawing attention. I found myself contemplating the type of society that an individual with his mindset would create, if afforded the opportunity. The consequences of the Hosu incident were intricate. We received a formal reprimand for engaging Stain without proper authorization. We received commendations for our courage and prompt decision-making. The manifesto delivered by Stalin during his capture generated significant discussion throughout Japan. His critique of the hero system struck a chord with a larger audience than the authorities were willing to acknowledge. Hashtags such as #Stain was right and #false heroes gained significant traction over several weeks. All Might came to see me in the hospital, his demeanor reflecting concern even though he wore his characteristic smile. "Young Midoriya," he commenced, taking a seat beside my bed. "Your actions, while bold, ultimately resulted in saving lives. I commend your development." "Thank you, All Might," I responded, although his commendation did not evoke the typical sense of pride I would expect. A transformation occurred within me, an increasing doubt regarding the system I was preparing to enter. "It appears that something is troubling you," he noted, reverting to his true form once we were in private. "What seems to be the matter, my son?" After a moment of contemplation, I chose to be forthright. Stain's remarks regarding heroes pursuing fame and financial gain instead of genuinely assisting others resonate with me. The notion of All Might as the sole authentic hero is one that I find compelling. All Might let out a deep sigh. Stain's viewpoint is overly simplistic. While it is true that some heroes may be driven by fame or fortune, they are still human, possessing inherent flaws and desires. However, this does not diminish the positive impact of their actions. "Is that sufficient?" I inquired. "Is there a system that accommodates self-interest while ensuring public protection? What alternative would you recommend?" All Might inquired with a gentle tone. "Is it appropriate to compel individuals to act purely out of altruism? Should we determine who qualifies as a hero based on their motivations instead of their actions?" I was unable to provide a satisfactory response. I aspire to embody the qualities of a true hero, someone who acts out of a sense of duty rather than for personal acclaim. "And that is the reason I selected you," All Might stated, placing his slender hand on mine. "Your intentions are commendable. However, exercise caution in your judgments of others, young Midoriya. The journey to heroism varies for each individual." His words were expected to provide reassurance. Ultimately, I was left with a greater number of questions than solutions. On the day of my discharge from the hospital, I received a message from Marcus inquiring if I would like to meet for coffee. I concurred, recognizing the necessity to engage with an individual who could potentially comprehend my perplexity. We convened at a serene cafe in proximity to Ua. Upon my arrival, I found Marcus already present, with 2 drinks placed on the table. "Green tea, is that correct?" he inquired as I took a seat. I expressed my gratitude with a nod, cradling the warm cup in my hands. "What led you to that conclusion?" "You mentioned it previously," he replied with a shrug. "How are you feeling?" "I am referring to your physical condition." "Improved," I responded. Recovery Girl addressed the majority of the damage. There is only some residual soreness remaining. Marcus acknowledged with a nod. "How about your mental state?" After some contemplation, I chose to be forthright. "Perplexed, ambiguous. The entire situation regarding Stain. It prompts you to reflect," Marcus concluded for me. "That's to be expected." He presented legitimate arguments, despite the extremity of his methods. "Your uncle was truly remarkable," I remarked, subtly shifting the topic. His approach to Stain and that Nomu was unprecedented. A subtle smile appeared on Marcus's lips. "Uncle Naruto demonstrates remarkable insight. He identifies challenges and solutions that often go unnoticed by others. He eliminated the Nomu," I observed quietly. "Similar to what you and Evelyn accomplished at USJ. It was essential given the circumstances in which he had individuals to safeguard," Marcus responded promptly. "Certain threats cannot be contained or reformed. They must be eradicated." I gazed into my tea, contemplating the implications. I have consistently held the view that heroes ought to strive to save all individuals, including those who may be considered villains. I believe that taking a life should be regarded as the final option. A commendable sentiment, Marcus acknowledged. However, there are instances when reality necessitates challenging decisions. If that Nomu had managed to escape alongside Stain, how many additional lives could have been lost? How many heroes? "I understand," I replied with a sigh. "It is simply not aligned with the principles I was instructed to associate with heroism." It is possible that the information you received was not comprehensive, Marcus proposed thoughtfully. The hero system offers a straightforward narrative where heroes consistently manage to rescue everyone, villains invariably face imprisonment, and justice is assured. However, reality is far more complex. What is the answer? I inquired, a hint of frustration evident in my tone. It is essential to acknowledge that there are instances where difficult decisions must be made. The system may have its imperfections, yet it remains the most effective option available. Marcus paused briefly, weighing his words with deliberation. What if an alternative approach existed? Not merely a revised hero system, but something entirely transformative. A society where the need for protection was eliminated because prevention was inherently integrated into its framework. That appears to be an ideal situation, I remarked with some skepticism. It is not utopia, Marcus clarified. Advancement, development, every system devised by humanity has transformed throughout history. Why would this instance be any exception? But who would be responsible for designing such a system? Who would take on the implementation? I asked. What measures are in place to prevent it from becoming tyrannical? It would necessitate outstanding leadership, Marcus acknowledged. An individual possessing the foresight to envision the potential of society and the fortitude to lead it towards that future. A person who prioritizes the advancement of the collective over individual benefit. The term evoked recollections of discussions with Naruto. Elevation, I reiterated. That term is also utilized by your uncle. He introduced the concept to our family, and I tend to be the one who aligns with him the most, as you may have noticed from my vocal support, Marcus explained. True leadership transcends the mere maintenance of the status quo or the accumulation of power. It is fundamentally about elevating society to its highest potential. As our discussion progressed, I became progressively more intrigued by the concept. Not due to the promise of straightforward solutions, it did not provide that, but because it recognized the complexity I was grappling with while presenting a way forward. As we concluded our discussions, I found my thoughts invigorated by fresh insights. The hero system I had admired throughout my life began to appear less as an ideal and more as a transitional phase, an essential yet flawed component in the progression of society. The subsequent weeks were characterized by a focused period of recovery, training, and thorough preparation for final examinations. I discovered that I was dedicating more time to the Graysons, particularly captivated by the viewpoints of Marcus and Naruto regarding heroism and societal issues. Mark and Eva from Class 1B participated in our training sessions from time to time, contributing various insights and techniques. It is essential to comprehend your responsibilities within the team, Eva articulated during one session. It is essential to consider not only your individual capabilities but also how they enhance and support the strengths of others. Similar to components of a greater entity, Mark remarked, each serves a distinct purpose, yet their combined strength surpasses that of their individual contributions. Their philosophy encompassed not only combat techniques but also addressed wider societal issues. The discussion centered on heroism not as a standalone achievement, but as a vital element within a well-functioning society, significant, yet insufficient without parallel progress in education, governance, economics, and culture. The discussions I engaged in, along with my experiences at Hosu and the USJ, progressively altered my viewpoint. The straightforward perception of heroes that I maintained since my youth, largely influenced by All Might's public image, evolved into a more complex and realistic understanding. Heroes were not without flaws. The system had its limitations. Moreover, it is crucial to recognize that a singular symbol of peace, no matter how potent and inspiring, cannot sustain societal cohesion indefinitely. All Might was experiencing a decline in strength. I possessed a deeper understanding of this than many others. Ultimately, he would need to resign, creating a gap that no individual could adequately occupy, certainly not me, at least not in the near future. What are the next steps? What transpired when the foundation that upheld the hero society was no longer viable? The questions lingered in my mind as I observed the news coverage of Stain's trial, the ongoing repercussions of the Endeavor abuse scandal, and the increasing villain activity despite the hero system's diligent efforts. There was a transformation occurring in Japan, within myself, and I was uncertain whether it represented progress or decline. The attack on the training camp took everyone by surprise. In light of heightened security protocols implemented after the USJ incident, members of the League of Villains successfully breached the forest where classes 1A and 1B were engaged in specialized training. Their objective appeared to be Kachan, although the reasons for their specific interest in him remained unclear. During the tumultuous attack, as teachers and students were dispersed across the forest, my emergency devices were essential, enabling us to effectively coordinate our defense and evacuation efforts. However, it proved insufficient. Despite our diligent efforts, the adversaries managed to apprehend Kachan. The last time I observed him, he was engaged in a fierce battle against a villain composed entirely of black mist, the very same individual who had previously teleported villains into USJ. As we reconvened at the camp's main building, assessing injuries and verifying the status of those unaccounted for, I experienced a profound sense of disappointment. Kachan was taken by villains for reasons that remain unclear, and I was unable to prevent it. We must pursue them, I asserted, regardless of my own injuries. Each moment we delay, a minute is what the professionals are utilizing to coordinate a rescue, Aizawa-sensei interrupted me. This matter does not fall under your purview, Midoriya. The authorities and professional heroes will take care of it. However, I was unable to accept that. Kachan was my classmate and childhood friend, despite the complexities of our history. I felt compelled to take action rather than remain passive while he was in jeopardy. That evening, I assembled a select team consisting of Todoroki, Iida, Yaoyorozu, and Kirishima to discuss a rescue operation. It was a risky decision, possibly unlawful, yet I found no alternative. We lack professional experience, Iida argued, his encounter with Stain making him especially wary. Our team lacks the necessary training and authority to conduct this type of operation. However, we possess an advantage that the professionals lack, I countered. Yaoyorozu can develop a tracker that can lock onto Kachan's DNA. This will enable us to locate him when the professionals are unable to do so. Even if we locate him, Todoroki observed, what will follow? These villains have already overcome professional heroes. What opportunity do we possess? We do not engage directly, I clarified. We will locate him, notify the professionals of his precise location, and allow them to manage the rescue operation. Following extensive discussions, they ultimately consented to my proposal, albeit with stringent stipulations regarding direct engagement with villains. As we were about to depart, I paused briefly before activating my emergency device, specifically aimed at Naruto. However, it was a timed alert rather than an immediate notification. Should we find ourselves entering a perilous situation, it is prudent to ensure that support is prepared. The tracker guided us to an unoccupied warehouse in Kamino Ward, an area characterized by its dilapidated conditions and minimal law enforcement oversight. As we approached with caution, it became evident why the adversaries had selected this location: numerous exits, inadequate lighting, and a limited presence of civilians. Please keep the plan in mind, I said quietly as we assumed our positions around the building. We acknowledge Kachan's attendance and will proceed to notify the professionals. Direct engagement will be avoided. Through a dirty window, I was able to discern several figures inside: the masked antagonist from USJ, a suited man who appeared to be instructing him, and Kachan, bound but alert and evidently enraged. I can confirm his presence, I stated through our communication devices. The main room is located on the second floor. There are at least 2 adversaries present. I am contacting the authorities at this moment, Yaoyorozu stated from her position. They will notify the professionals. Good, I acknowledged, though she was unable to perceive my response. Now we proceed to wait. An unexpected explosion disrupted the atmosphere of the building, halting my speech. The source of the disturbance was not Kachan's quirk. Rather, it originated from the front entrance, where a team of professional heroes had just made their entrance. They have arrived, Kirishima announced over the communication system. What methods were employed to locate this establishment? I lacked the opportunity to reflect. The warehouse was filled with turmoil as adversaries and champions engaged in conflict. I observed All Might himself entering the scene, making his way directly toward Kachan. However, there appeared to be an issue. The man in the suit, whom I now identified as Shigaraki's mentor due to their interaction, appeared entirely unfazed by the hero's presence. It seemed as though he had anticipated it. We must leave this location, I informed the group. There appears to be an issue. Before our withdrawal, a significant explosion erupted in the upper levels of the building. The wall adjacent to me collapsed, causing me to fall backward as fragments cascaded around me. As the chaos subsided, I was confronted with a chilling sight. All Might engaged in battle with a formidable, muscular entity featuring an exposed brain and facial tubes, a being reminiscent of a more evolved iteration of the Nomu from USJ. All for one, I whispered, immediately identifying the villain as if my quirk was instinctively reacting to his presence. The ensuing battle was unlike anything I had ever observed. Structures collapsed under the impact of their strikes. Shockwaves displaced both heroes and villains, causing them to lose their footing. The atmosphere was charged with the intensity of their conflict. All Might was operating at his maximum capacity, yet it proved insufficient. All for One countered him with equal force, exchanging barbs and gradually uncovering the truths that All Might had concealed: his diminishing strength, his debilitating injury, and the finite time left in his role as the symbol of peace. "You have diminished in strength, All Might," All for One's mechanical voice resonated throughout the battlefield. "I have consistently developed my strength." I observed with great concern as All for One lifted his hand, the surrounding air warping as he engaged multiple quirks at once. "I would like to present the outcomes of my recent modifications. This is a development I acquired after engaging with two particularly intriguing individuals." A brilliant light emanated from his palm, completely enveloping All Might. As the glare diminished, my mentor appeared, smoke emanating from his worn physique, his robust figure wavering like a flickering light bulb. "What have you done?" All Might exclaimed, blood seeping from his mouth. "The phenomenon of cellular degradation," All for One articulated with a nonchalant demeanor, akin to a discussion about the weather. "It appears to be quite effective for your specific physiology, wouldn't you agree?" All Might knelt, his imposing figure diminishing before our gaze. It was not the gradual deflation I had previously observed, but rather a swift and distressing collapse. In an instant, the symbol of peace vanished, giving way to the skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi. Gasps resonated throughout the battlefield as both heroes and civilians observed the unveiling of All Might's true form to the world. Camera drones documented the event, transmitting the moment lived throughout Japan. "And thus, the formidable symbol of peace has fallen," All for One proclaimed, his voice resonating clearly for the cameras. "An illusion, a facade masquerading as an unstoppable force. I may be at a disadvantage," All Might stated, making an effort to rise to his feet despite the circumstances, "but as long as I am alive, I will continue to fight for the protection of the innocent." His defiance and determination, even in the face of his revealed weakness, moved me to tears. This was what established him as a true hero. It is not his power that defines him, but rather his heart. All for One appeared to find it entertaining. "Commendable. Ineffective, yet commendable." He elevated his hand once more, energy coalescing around it in dark, rhythmic waves. "Farewell, symbol of peace. Your era concludes this evening." I was unable to move. I intended to, but it felt as though my legs were immobilized. I preferred not to watch. I found it difficult to witness my mentor, my role model, being diminished in front of others. However, I found myself unable to avert my gaze, paralyzed by a sense of dread as the moment seemed to extend indefinitely. The explosion did not occur. A substantial figure emerged between All Might and All for One, appearing as if it had materialized from thin air. The energy blast intended to conclude All Might's life collided with an unyielding force. "That is sufficient," a voice emerged from the smoke, one that I recognized instantly. As the smoke cleared, he remained standing, the upper portion of his suit partially charred, revealing a significant expanse of skin. "Do not be concerned," Naruto stated as he removed the last charred piece of clothing, leaving his torso exposed. "At this moment, I am present." Time appeared to pause as Naruto positioned himself between All Might and All for One, the energy blast fading harmlessly against his steadfast presence. "That is sufficient," he declared, his voice resonating across the ravaged battlefield with composed authority. As the smoke dissipated, exposing his partially damaged suit, Naruto systematically removed the remaining charred fabric, leaving his torso exposed. "Do not be concerned," he stated, his imposing figure outlined by the devastation in the background. "At this moment, I am present." All for One paused, his head tilting slightly as he assessed this unforeseen development. "Ah, I see," he remarked, his mechanical voice subtly expressing amusement. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Detective Naruto Grayson." Behind Naruto, All Might managed to rise to his feet, blood seeping from his mouth. "Detective, your presence here is unwarranted. This situation does not fall under police jurisdiction." "On the contrary," Naruto responded, maintaining his gaze on All for One without turning. When a civilian indicates distress, it is imperative to respond, irrespective of jurisdiction. All for One chuckled, the sound altered by his breathing apparatus. This is quite an example of bureaucracy at work. However, I must inform you that you are interrupting a private gathering of longtime acquaintances. With deliberate precision, the villain raised his hand once more, this time unleashing a blast of compressed air capable of demolishing buildings directly at Naruto. The detective remained still, showing no signs of movement or reaction. The assault hit him with full intensity, generating a shockwave that fractured adjacent windows, yet Naruto stood resolute, seemingly anchored to the ground, his form shielding Toshinori behind him. Fascinating, All for One remarked. A quirk that enhances strength and exhibits exceptional durability. It bears some resemblance to All Might's abilities, albeit with distinct parameters. Naruto advanced with a deliberate step forward. Only one. However, there was an element in that movement, its precision and controlled power, that caused All for One to instinctively retreat a step. You will surrender, Naruto asserted, not as a demand but as an undeniable truth. All for One's laughter resonated through his respirator. Esteemed detective, I have been engaged in this pursuit long before your grandfather's time. Do you genuinely believe? His words halted abruptly as Naruto materialized before him, not through running or jumping, but simply present, as if the distance between them had momentarily vanished. All for One had a limited opportunity to engage a defensive quirk before Naruto's fist struck his chest, propelling him through 3 buildings. In living rooms throughout Japan, families observed in astonished silence as the live broadcast featured Detective Naruto Grayson, a name that had gained recognition only after the Endeavor scandal, confronting the most formidable villain the nation had ever encountered. Who is that? A father inquired, leaning forward in his recliner, his gaze intently focused on the screen. His teenage daughter, a student at UA, quietly expressed her admiration. That's Eva's father, the detective who apprehended Endeavor. On another screen, attendees in a downtown Tokyo bar watched as camera drones filmed All for One emerging from the rubble, his suit ripped but his body appearing uninjured. Did you see that? A man exclaimed. He just appeared. Like teleportation. That's not teleportation, another patron said, his gaze never leaving the screen. That was pure speed. He's faster than the cameras can track. Government officials gathered in the Prime Minister's office, grimly staring at various screens. Who authorized the police intervention? The Minister of Defense inquired. This was supposed to be a hero operation. All for One will lose his hide in this affair. This was intended to be All Might's execution. No one, his aide responded, nervously checking reports. Detective Grayson appears to be acting independently. The Prime Minister leaned forward and studied the footage. Can he win against that? Nobody had an answer. All for One emerged from the ruins, dust falling over his shoulders. With emotion, his damaged suit healed itself, the fibers effortlessly reuniting. Regeneration, he explained in conversation. Combined with molecular reconstruction, quite useful for maintaining appearances. He stretched his neck, and the vertebrae crackled back into place. I must say, detective, you're even more impressive than my sources suggested. And they were quite effusive in their praise. Naruto remained motionless, his expression unchanging as he evaluated his opponent. Not much for banter, are you? All for One groaned heavily. Pity, I do so enjoy a good conversation during these encounters. All Might, for all his faults, at least had a certain theatrical flair. Behind them, pro-heroes were evacuating citizens from the combat zone, while others built a cordon to prevent villains from fleeing. Endeavor and Best Jeanist were supporting All Might, who could hardly stand due to his malnourished appearance. You should leave, Naruto said without turning. This area is no longer safe for heroes or civilians. We can't just. Endeavor started. You can and will, Naruto interrupted him. Your priority is civilian evacuation and All Might's medical treatment. I will handle this. Something in his tone, total conviction without a trace of doubt, caused Endeavor to hesitate before nodding unwillingly. Come on, he instructed the others. Let's move. As they retreated, All for One laughed. So commanding, so imperial. You remind me of someone I knew long ago from a movie I watched. Before quirks, if you can imagine such a primitive time. He spread his arms, and the ground around him started to fracture and move. But enough reminiscing. Let me show you what true power looks like. The concrete beneath Naruto's feet instantly dissolved, transforming into quicksand that attempted to drag him down. Metal beams from the collapsed buildings twisted into spears and flung themselves at him from all sides. Naruto did not seem concerned. He vibrated his body's atoms at the exact appropriate frequency by slightly adjusting his chemical structure. The metal spears passed through him, as if he were a phantom, and embedded themselves in the ground beyond. Regarding the quicksand, he simply rose above it, hovering several feet in the air. Flight as well, All for One inquired. You are full of surprises. Your assessment is incomplete, Naruto stated, eventually breaking his silence. As is your understanding of this situation? All for One inclined his head. Oh, do enlighten me, detective. You believe you're in control, Naruto said. You are not. With that, he took deliberate, measured strides through the air, approaching All for One like an unstoppable force of nature. All for One answered by lifting both hands, combining several oddities into a deadly assault. The air between them twisted as gravity accelerated 1,000-fold, crushing structures to dust. Lightning arced from his fingertips, and the oxygen around Naruto flared in a fiery explosion that could melt steel. Despite this onslaught, Naruto continued to go forward unobstructed. Impossible, All for One mumbled, real surprise in his tone. Naruto took 3 more steps, clamping his enormous palm around All for One's throat. You have no idea what is possible, he said calmly, raising the villain off the ground. Your quirks are impressive but fundamentally limited by your understanding of molecular structure. All for One's response was to trigger another quirk, one that caused his body to produce radiation at levels capable of killing any human instantly. Naruto simply strengthened his hold. Radiation manipulation, Naruto explained. Ineffective against my cellular composition. With a careless gesture, he flung All for One into another building, crushing it to rubble. In the UA teacher's lounge, the staff watched the conflict unfold with reactions ranging from astonishment to wonder, having refused to go to Bakugo's rescue on All Might's orders. He immediately felt that there was too great a risk that they would become liabilities. Is this happening? Present Mike asked, surprisingly quiet. A detective going toe-to-toe with whatever that monster is. His quirk, Midnight remarked. I've never seen anything like it. Multiple abilities that seem to work in perfect harmony. Aizawa's eyes narrowed as he examined the tape. It's not just his quirk. Look at his movements, his positioning. That's decades of combat experience. Military training at the highest level. But against All for One. Principal Nezu's voice trailed off, his perceptive eyes scrutinizing every detail of the conflict. Even All Might couldn't defeat him without nearly dying. On television, All for One reappeared from the rubble, this time severely injured despite his regeneration. Part of his mask had crumbled, revealing damaged and twisted flesh nearly beyond recognition. We should be there, Vlad King muttered, his hands clenched. Heroes shouldn't be sitting back while a police officer fights our battles. This isn't our battle anymore, Aizawa said gently. Look at them. They're operating on a level beyond what most pros can handle. We'd just be in the way. No one disagreed with his assessment. All for One stood amidst the debris, his breathing becoming heavier. The gap in his mask spread as he reached up and carefully removed the broken section, showing a portion of his wrecked face eye socket empty, skin puckered and scarred from previous wounds. Well played, detective, he remarked, his natural voice blending with the synthetic one in an unsettling harmony. It's been quite some time since anyone has damaged this body so effectively. He straightened and rolled his shoulders. I believe it's time to take this encounter more seriously. The ground beneath him began to shift, changing itself rather than simply liquefying. Concrete, metal, and rubble flowed like water, building a fast expanding platform that carried All for One high above the battlefield. The material began to morph, forming a vast arena suspended in midair, a floating coliseum with All for One at its core. Let's have some proper space for our dance, shall we? He asked. Unless heights trouble you, detective. Naruto climbed slowly and landed on the floating arena's edge. The platform was approximately 100 meters wide, with its surface continually shifting and reconstructing. Much better, All for One agreed, widening his arms. Now, shall we continue our discussion about possibility and limitation? The air around him shimmered as he activated many quirks at once. The temperature dropped, and ice crystals formed throughout the arena's surface. Then, in a somewhat theatrical action, he thrust his hand forward. A flurry of elemental assaults burst toward Naruto, including fire, lightning, pressurized water, and metal shards moving at speeds beyond normal human vision. Naruto answered easily. His palm moved in a circular pattern, causing the air around it to superheat due to the friction of his speeding molecules. The ensuing heat barrier evaporated the water and melted the metal shards, while his other hand created a counter-current to spread the fire and lightning. Thermal manipulation, All for One said with real curiosity in his voice. Generated through molecular vibration rather than a specific quirk. Fascinating. Your analysis remains incomplete, Naruto answered, moving steadily across the arena. All for One responded by completely changing their approach. The floating platform underneath them suddenly produced huge spikes that surged up toward Naruto. Simultaneously, the air appeared to harden into crystalline blades that cut from all angles. Naruto did not dodge. Instead, he changed the density of his body, allowing the strikes to pass through him safely. Where physical avoidance was required, his motions were brief, accurate, and wasted no energy. You know, All for One continued his assault without stop. You remind me of a character from an old pre-quirk story. A man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. They called him Baba Yaga. No, he corrected himself. He wasn't the Baba Yaga. He was the one you sent to kill the Baba Yaga. Naruto maintained an indifferent demeanor as he closed the gap between them. Internally, he was astonished. What about John Wick? Naruto thought to himself, almost amused. Your references are irrelevant. Perhaps, the group said, but one does miss cultural touchstones when they've been lost to time. The pre-quirk era had such delightful entertainment. Star Wars, Hellsing, One Piece, Solo Leveling. Ah, but you wouldn't know these, would you? Such a shame. As he spoke, the arena underneath them changed again. The solid surface transformed into a tangle of shifting platforms, requiring Naruto to constantly adjust his footing. All for One took advantage of this diversion to execute another combination attack on Naruto. Gravity manipulation to increase his weight 100-fold, followed by a disintegration wave aimed at the platform beneath him, where he expected Naruto to fall due to the pressure. Naruto merely accelerated his molecules, phasing through the crumbling platform and negating gravity through flight. You continue to impress, All for One noted. But let's see how you handle this. He raised both hands, and debris from the collapsed buildings soared into the air, swirling about them like a steel whirlwind. All for One squeezed and bent the material with precision, resulting in two shining swords that floated to his hands. The blades ignited with energy, emitting strong heat that warped the air around them. I've always wanted to try this, All for One stated, adopting a traditional fencing posture. Ever since I saw it in an old movie. Star Wars, they called it. Lightsabers, elegant weapons from a more civilized age. He twisted the energy blades with unexpected grace. Shall we? Izuku Midoriya sat with his students in a remote location, watching the combat on a wall-mounted television after fleeing despite widespread outcry. His hands were so tightly squeezed that his knuckles became white. This is insane, Hiroshima muttered. That detective is fighting like it's nothing, Todoroki concluded for him. Like he's done this 1,000 times before. Iida adjusted his glasses anxiously. The structural damage alone is catastrophic. Half of Kamino Ward is already destroyed. They watched on TV as All for One formed two energy swords and assumed a battle position. The camera drones circled warily, catching the bizarre scene of a villain and detective ready for a duel on a floating platform high above the city. Is that a lightsaber? Kaminari asked, eliciting puzzled looks from his classmates. You know, from Star Wars. From what? Ashido inquired. It's this old pre-quirk movie series my grandpa was obsessed with, Kaminari remarked. He had collector's editions and everything. Their talk ended as Naruto made his move. Naruto looked at the flashing blades with slight fascination. Energy containment fields shaped into blades. Inefficient but functional. Come now, detective, All for One chastised, advancing with his swords ready. Where's your sense of drama? Of theater? Unnecessary, Naruto said simply. All for One fought with surprising skill, moving their dual swords in complicated patterns that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Naruto escaped the initial round of strikes with minimal movement while analyzing his opponent's technique. You've had training, he remarked, continuing to sidestep without response. I've had more than a century to learn, All For One said, stepping up his onslaught. One accumulates many skills over such a lifespan. A horizontal cut landed uncomfortably close to Naruto's throat. Instead of fleeing, he charged into the fray, moving his hand to seize All For One's wrist. He disarmed the enemy of one sword with a seemingly gentle twist that held enough force to shatter most things in the world. The energy sword twirled in the air. Naruto grabbed it by the hilt, the brilliant red blade buzzing as he shifted his hold. Centuries are relative, he said, studying the weapon briefly before taking a commanding attitude. As a skill, All For One's mask could not convey emotion, but his body language implied astonishment. Well, the detective knows bladework. Another surprise in a day full of them. They circled each other, their energy blades throwing strange shadows on the floating arena. All For One struck first, sending his final sword arcing toward Naruto's side. The investigator parried with the least amount of movement, then countered with a thrust that All For One narrowly avoided. Classical form, All For One observed, recovering swiftly. Interesting choice. Naruto did not answer verbally. Instead, he unleashed a series of attacks, forcing All For One to adopt a defensive position. Each hit was calculated and precise, challenging the villain's defense from several angles. All For One initially matched him, with his century-plus of expertise reflected in his technique. But as the exchange progressed, the disparity in their abilities became clear. Naruto's bladework was not merely trained, it was polished, developed over thousands of years of warfare across multiple worlds, and he learned to employ any and all forms of weaponry to counter them if necessary. A particularly complicated sequence concluded with Naruto's blade tearing through All For One's guard, leaving a searing line across his breast. The villain staggered back. Regeneration had already healed the wound, but the message was plain. I am a master of all forms of weaponry and combat, Naruto said, his voice steady despite the exertion. Your skills, while considerable, are inadequate. All For One responded by instantly multiplying his attacks, sprouting 4 more arms from his torso, each brandishing a newly generated energy blade. Then perhaps quantity will offset quality. The 6 blades went in different directions, assaulting from every angle at the same time. It should have been overpowering and difficult to defend against, yet Naruto moved with ease, his single blade intercepting each assault at just the precise time. Naruto disarmed 2 of the extra arms in a single sweep, then destroyed the limbs completely with his return stroke, which was too fast for the cameras to catch. All For One screamed in pain, but regenerated instantly, the stumps regenerating into functional arms. Impressive. Maybe instead of Wick, you're a Dooku, or a Yoda for that matter. All For One acknowledged, retiring to make room. But let's see how you handle a different sort of challenge. He turned off his remaining energy blades, allowing them to evaporate into particles of light. Then, placing both hands on the platform underneath them, he activated a quirk that caused vibrations throughout the structure. The floating arena began to split apart, with chunks crumbling away. However, instead of descending, the particles remained suspended in the air, circled them like planetary debris. I've always been fascinated by the concept of necromancy, All For One admitted casually. The ability to command the dead. While no quirk has manifested that exact power, I've found that combining certain abilities produces similar results. The debris around them started to glow in an eerie light. Each component produced shadowy creatures, humanoid shapes that coalesced into what looked to be people. Hundreds, then thousands, filled the air around the crumbling arena. Behold, All For One exclaimed, opening his arms widely. The accumulated power of every strong quirk user I've acquired over the decades. Their bodies may be gone, but their quirks, their essence those I preserved. Now, arise my soldiers. Arise for your monarch. The shadow army surrounded them, each figure unique but definitely not human, like echoes of humans who previously existed. I am the no-life king, All For One declared as he bowed, referring to Alucard in a dramatic reference that everyone except himself missed. Now, detective, what will you do against an army of the dead? Officers flocked around televisions showing footage of the battle at Musudafu Police Department headquarters. Captain Morita watched with pride and concern as his detective battled what appeared to be an army of shadow creatures. I knew Grayson was good, he said, but this is beyond anything I imagined. Detective Tanaka nodded, his face stern. Sir, should we be deploying backup? The Special Response Unit, at least. Morita shook his head slowly. Look at what they're doing, Tanaka. Look at the level they're operating on. What would our response unit do except get in the way? On screen, the Shadow Army rushed towards Naruto, who stood calmly in their midst, the energy sword still humming in his palm. Besides, Morita said quietly, I think Detective Grayson has this under control. Naruto viewed the Shadow Army with clinical objectivity. Each construct looked to have idiosyncrasies, but different ones depending on how they manifested. Some emitted energy, while others underwent physical alterations or influenced their surroundings. You seem severely disadvantaged, Detective, All For One observed from behind his soldiers. You see, the reason I always had trouble with that abominable All Might was One For All's resistance to various abilities. It's essentially a quirk that turns the wielder into a force of nature, one of pure physicality, while granting them immunity to forms of manipulation, like control of their body, or poison, or mind control. He tilted his head, looking at Naruto with newfound interest. Though, what's surprising is that you seem to have a similar quirk. I've been trying to, shall we say, Jedi mind trick you this entire time, but it just isn't working. The first wave of shadow constructs approached Naruto, and their strikes were synchronized despite their ethereal nature. Energy blasts, physical attacks, and environmental manipulations all converged on him at once. Naruto answered by accelerating his molecules to the utmost speed possible in this confined reality. The air surrounding him quickly became superheated, forming a plasma barrier that destroyed the initial wave of attackers. His actions blurred as he destroyed each approaching shadow, the energy blade slashing through with surgical accuracy. However, for every structure he demolished, 2 new ones were built in its stead. The army was limitless, utilizing All For One's extensive collection of stolen oddities. You know, Detective, you can't win by just wearing me down, All For One shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos around them. Even with your amazing skills, there are just way too many. At some point, you'll get worn out. At some point, you're bound to slip up. Naruto took a moment before he replied. He kept going with his careful dismantling of the Shadow Army, moving in a way that was both efficient and incredibly powerful. After sending off another wave, he took a moment to pause, holding the energy blade casually at his side. I think there's a flaw in your strategy, he said. These constructs have the quirks, but they lack the skill or intelligence of the original owners. They strike hard, but it feels like there's no real reason behind it. To make his point clear, Naruto picked up speed once more, zipping through the Shadow Army instead of facing it head-on. He had one goal in mind, to take down All For One himself. The villain hardly had a moment to get his guard up before Naruto charged at him, the energy blade slicing through the air towards him. All For One quickly threw up a shield quirk to block the attack, but the force of the impact still sent him sliding back across the remnants of the floating platform. Direct confrontation, All For One remarked, bouncing back swiftly. It's bold, yet you can see it coming. Being effective is more important than catching someone off guard, Naruto said, continuing his assault. All For One kicked into gear, activating a bunch of defensive quirks all at once, force fields, hardening, and impact redirection. Still, Naruto's hits had him backing up all the time. I have to say, All For One said while dodging attacks, you're something special. In all my years, I've hardly ever met someone who could connect with me so perfectly. The Shadow Army came together, moving in a rush to protect their master. Naruto was caught in a tough spot, juggling his focus between All For One and the never-ending constructs around him. For the first time since the battle started, the detective looked like he was feeling the strain. It wasn't fatigue. His Viltrumite body, even with the limits of this world, was way beyond those human weaknesses. It was more about tweaking his strategy and taking a fresh look at the situation. All For One caught on. Oh, there it is. Just a little sign of worry. So, you're starting to see how pointless your situation is, huh, detective? Rather than responding, Naruto plunged his energy blade into the platform below them. The superheated weapon plunged deep into the material, and then Naruto focused his molecular acceleration through it. Right away, things went south. The whole floating arena started to shake at a molecular level. He had figured out how to control his smart atoms to connect to other things, not just himself, and now the structure was losing its stability. What are you? All for One started, but before he could finish, the platform crumbled away beneath them, breaking down not into pieces but into its very atoms. The Shadow Army, connected to the material that All for One had used to bring them to life, started to fade away as their anchor point melted away. As the arena crumbled around them, both fighters stayed up in the air, with harmless bits raining down on the ruined city beneath. "Nice improvisation," All for One said, hovering across from Naruto. "But in the end, it's all for nothing. I can whip up more constructs using just about any material. The city down there has so many resources to offer." He pointed to the ground, almost like he was trying to make a point. Debris started to lift again, creating a fresh platform underneath them. Just when they thought everything was on track, something unexpected grabbed their attention. Two figures were coming up fast from the direction of Ua, Marcus and Evelyn Grayson, moving so quickly that they almost seemed to blur together. They touched down on the remnants of a nearby building, quickly taking stock of what was going on. "Dad," Evelyn shouted, "we've got All Might on our side. They're taking him to the emergency medical facilities." "The evacuation is all done," Marcus said. "Looks like there haven't been any civilian casualties reported." Naruto gave a quick nod, recognizing their report while keeping his gaze fixed on All for One. "How sweet," the villain remarked. "It's all about family. Your kids are something, Detective. That's nearly as impressive as your other daughter." There was something in his tone that made Naruto narrow his eyes just a bit. It was the first real emotional reaction he'd shown throughout the whole confrontation. "Oh, did I hit a sore spot?" All for One's voice dripped with mock concern. "I was just giving a shout out to young Samantha's skills. It's impressive how she combines her amazing skills in molecular manipulation with her father's clever strategies. That's a powerful mix." Marcus and Evelyn looked at each other, clearly puzzled and not quite getting the reference. "It looks like your information isn't complete," Naruto said, keeping his voice steady even though you could see a bit of tension in the way he was standing. "Really?" All for One tilted his head, curious about what was happening. "I don't think so, Detective." Just as Naruto was about to say something, All for One waved his hand dramatically. The air next to him shimmered, creating a portal that looked a lot like the one Kurogiri had used to teleport the League of Villains. Out of this portal came someone I recognized right away, Samantha, dressed in her war outfit, her masked face showing nothing at all. "Dad," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of the battlefield. In the UA dorms, Class 1A students gathered around their common room TV, eyes wide and mouths agape as they took in the unfolding scene. "Wait, did she just say Dad?" Uraraka leaned in and whispered, her eyes sparkling with surprise. "So, who's this Samantha?" Suyu added, tapping her chin thoughtfully as she looked puzzled. Kaminari leaned in closer, narrowing his eyes at the screen. "That outfit looks familiar. I think I've seen it somewhere before. Have you seen the news about that new villain group that's taking over the drug trade? It's quite the story. The one featuring the creepy woman in black." "Yeah, it's War," Juro said, her face serious. "They refer to her as War. So, why did she end up calling Detective Grayson Dad?" Hagakuri asked, her floating uniform shifting a bit as if it were feeling a little anxious. Everyone was left in suspense, eyes glued to the screen as the broadcast zoomed in on Naruto's expression while he took in the masked woman stepping out of the portal. Well, this is an unexpected turn of events, All for One remarked, his mechanical voice dripping with a hint of smugness. "Let me introduce you to War, though it looks like you already know him." Naruto stood completely still, his face giving nothing away as he took in the situation around him. "You know, Detective," All for One said, putting a hand on Samantha's shoulder, "your talented daughter thought, without you knowing, that she could sneak into my organization. She figured she could take her time, collecting information for her beloved dad." He let out a chuckle, though it came out a bit funny because of his respirator. "That's some serious dedication. That's some serious family loyalty right there." It was nearly heartwarming. All for One reached out and patted Samantha's head, but it felt more like a twisted version of affection. "Sadly for her, mind control quirks are kind of my thing. She's been in my orbit for months, whipping up the right concoctions to boost my power and skills without any downsides." He spoke with a real sense of appreciation. "Honestly, the way we can manipulate molecules is just incredible. I can't wait to get the chance to do it myself someday. Her body specially fits her quirk." Samantha stayed still under his touch, her masked face turned toward Naruto. "So, Detective," All for One said, his tone getting a bit more serious, "you've got a choice to make. Are you going to come after me knowing your daughter could get hurt? Are you going to sacrifice yourself for her instead?" To make his point clear, he put an arm around Samantha's throat, using her as a human shield between him and Naruto. In Japan, people were glued to their screens, gasping as the villain unveiled his hostage, none other than the detective's daughter, the very one who had been trying to take him down. In living rooms, bars, offices, and public squares, folks were on the edge of their seats, eager to find out what would unfold next. "That guy," a construction worker said under his breath, his fists tight as he glanced at the broadcast on his phone during his break. "How could he possibly use someone's kid against them?" An elderly woman whispered, her eyes glistening with tears as she observed from her apartment. In the Prime Minister's office, officials shared worried glances. "Well, this just got a bit tricky," the Minister of Justice remarked softly. "So, if Detective Grayson puts his daughter's safety first. So, All for One gets away," the Prime Minister wrapped up for him. "So, we end up losing our symbol of peace and our best shot at catching this villain." Naruto's expression was completely neutral as he looked at All for One and Samantha. He stood easy, his energy blade hanging casually at his side. "I think your take on the situation might be a bit off," he said at last. All for One tightened his grip around Samantha's throat. "Oh, could you share some insights with me, Detective? What am I missing in this heartfelt family drama?" "You think there's leverage when there isn't," Naruto said. "It seems like you're thinking you know something that you actually might not." "I've got it covered," All for One insisted. "I get that she's your oldest daughter. I've got to say, her skills in molecular manipulation are just off the charts. I know you wouldn't put her in danger, no matter how big a threat I might be." To make his point clear, he activated a cutting quirk, forming a visible blade of energy at his fingertip and gently pressing it against Samantha's throat. "All right, just put down your weapon and give up," All for One said firmly. "Or see your daughter pass away right in front of you." For the first time since the battle started, Naruto paused. He lowered the energy blade in his hand a bit, keeping his eyes on Samantha's masked face. All for One's shadow army gathered around them, with thousands of ghostly figures swirling in the air, all set to strike at their master's signal. "Exactly," the villain said with a grin. "It's an easy choice. Your life for hers." The shadow constructs rushed in, wrapping Naruto in a whirlwind of strikes. This time, he didn't bother to defend himself, just letting the shadow army hit him over and over. Marcus and Evelyn moved ahead, clearly ready to step in, but Naruto's voice rang out above the noise, "Stand down. This is my fight." The shadow attacks just kept coming, and each one hit hard. Naruto stood tall, keeping his gaze fixed on Samantha's mask, no matter the chaos around him. "Dad," Samantha called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of the battlefield, but it had a tense edge to it. "I'm sorry." All for One let out a chuckle. "Yeah, you should definitely say sorry to your dad for not meeting expectations. For being too weak to resist my control." But you could tell something was shifting in Samantha's posture, a hint of tension, a building determination. "I'm sorry," she said again, her hand resting on her stomach. "I just didn't feel strong enough." "What are you?" All for One started, feeling like something was off all of a sudden. Samantha felt a surge of pink energy burst from her hand, shooting through her own body and hitting All for One right in the chest behind her. The villain was taken aback, his grip loosening as the energy ripped through him, leaving a perfect circular hole where his vital organs used to be. "No way," he breathed, stumbling back. "So, about this mind control. Was never real," Samantha said, her voice barely above a whisper, only audible to those nearby. She looked down, sinking to her knees as blood began to pool beneath her. "You were the one who got played the whole time." In that moment of distraction, Naruto made his move, not with the same speed as before, but with his real one. One moment he was surrounded by the shadow army, and the next, he found himself right in front of All for One, his fist already swinging. The punch landed squarely on All for One's head, powered by all of Naruto's strength. The villain's skull just couldn't take it anymore. It burst open in a messy splash of blood, bits of bone, and brain matter, while his body fell apart like a used-up puppet. Just as All for One's headless body was about to hit the ground, Naruto swooped in to catch Samantha as she fell, holding her with surprising tenderness. "Dad," she whispered, her mask now shattered from the impact of her own strike. "So, did I do okay?" "Yeah," Naruto said quietly, ensuring no one noticed his lips moving or heard him, his voice gentle for the first time. "You did an awesome job in your role. So, people are getting a glimpse of a more heroic and compassionate side of their future emperor. And all it took was a little acting. Plus, his daughter didn't even feel a thing since she managed to control her pain receptors." He quickly put his hand over the wound in her abdomen, not wanting to waste any time. His palm started to glow as he sped up the molecules in his hand, creating enough heat to cauterize the injury. Samantha didn't scream or flinch at all, which just goes to show that this was all part of the plan. It was clear she wasn't feeling the kind of pain a regular person would from a wound like that. "We've got to get her to a hospital," Naruto said, his voice reaching Marcus and Evelyn who were waiting nearby. "It's done." Holding Samantha close, Naruto lifted off the ground, leaving the headless body of All for One and the fading shadow army behind him. Marcus and Evelyn quickly followed, looking serious but ready to tackle whatever came next. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.